the philosophy of science sort of comes more so in how we interpret like concepts such as like quantum mechanics, or
Yeah.
when we start to sort of go into the origins of the universe. And so I don't think God is a huge thing in my
What percentage
in
would
my
you give
endeavor.
it? What percentage you think?
So if you were to ask me, like outside of these discussions, I would just say I don't believe that there is a God.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like, if you were to probe my understanding, I would say it only becomes relevant when we're talking about things that I'm speculative about. And so in my day to day life, it doesn't have great importance. But when we're talking about like the origins of the universe, this is where I would probably encounter the concept of God, and that would be a small percentage
That's
for the
really cool. That's
importance.
really cool that you leave that percentage there, though, man. How, like, do you see a deficiency somewhat in, I guess, critical thinking to a person that is involved in academia or science that doesn't leave a small percentage for those, I guess, possibilities, I want to say?
Well, the thing is like when people present arguments for God, I think the way that they go about it, I don't accept these arguments. I think some of the premises that they use to draw was, the arguments that they use to conclude that there is a God, I reject them based on the on the soundness of the
Yeah,
premises that. But
sure.
I think when it comes to asserting things about there being a God or not, I have trouble when people make the assertion that there is no God or that there is a God, right? And I think most people on this app that engage in these debates or discussions more or less take that approach.
Are assertive, assertive in their approach. Yeah.
I think so, but I sometimes wonder if my non-assertiveness comes from me being a sub. You know what I mean?
Oh my God.
Good callback, Robbie.
Yeah, these things fascinate me. I guess the method of rational thinking is more important at the end of the day than your conclusions, and that's always the
Well,
real.
I prefer having just like discussions where we can find common ground more than I do like debating or yelling.
Okay, wait,
You know.
wait. I totally,
Is that why you wanted to talk about everyone's kinks today?
I,
Shut the fuck up. I'm literally trying to have a nice conversation.
I totally
Wait, I'm
agree.
just
I
poking fun.
totally agree with you, but this is the same pushback I kind of gave Robbie. Is like when we are in a situation of disagreeability, we need a strategy. Like when I'm in a disagreement, I need a strategy. I agree. I would
Black Labs, what is this nickname for me? Whitaker? Like, what is this? I don't understand.
I don't understand why that's a
Whitaker
bad name.
Bank.
That's a blessed name. What do you mean?
A blessed name.
Is asking people that?
like what happens when we can't find common ground.
As in, like, Whitaker National Bank.
No, I don't know. I think Whitaker just sounds really funny, but it's also, I don't know, like.
Sure.
I thought
Yeah, I
I
do
misread it
think
first. I thought it was Wifter.
it's not Wifter. No.
Wifter's better.
I do think that having common ground is the best way to like try to talk things out. Like if you're just trying to like win a conversation, I didn't bring it up. So I just I think that that's probably like the best way to go about it. I prefer having those conversations, to be honest.
I agree. I prefer them as well. It's just when we cannot find common ground, that's the strategy that really interests me.
I don't know why Jim is assuming that I would bring this up. Like, what kind of assumption is that?
Who did bring it up?
Who did bring it up?
Robbie was the one who brought it up. Wait, just
Who's
really want to know
Robbie?
everyone's results.
Sorry that I bring it up, guys.
Don't be
I
sorry.
really
it's okay,
didn't.
you're
Don't
fine.
be sorry, Robbie.
Wait, no,
No,
wait.
Robbie,
Robbie,
you're
it's fine.
totally
You brought it
fine.
up. Wit really wanted to know everyone's results, though. So,
Well,
like,
because I
Wit owes some
had
responsibility.
intuitions and I wanted them to be confirmed, and they were because I was really good at it.
We love you, Robbie.
Thanks, my man, Coco. Nothing but love, G.
No, I am actually honored and
So
flattered that you guys
classic.
feel comfortable enough to share that.
I feel like
nailed
we're all
Darth to a
caricatures
T.
of
I just
ourselves.
want everyone to know that, like, I knew
We are.
Darth's top 3. Like, I knew it.
No, you nailed it.
You did. You
nailed
did guess
it.
his top three.
Top 4, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Honestly, fairly impressive.
Logic Troll, just to sort of speak on that topic, I think my approach to learn things isn't to go out and prove myself after I have knowledge about things. And so my desire to want to debate is not really there. But for me, like learning about these things, like about the philosophy of science and different areas within science, wherever I can, is more so just a passion that I have for knowledge and trying to understand the world around me, right? And so when the situation does come up where I have to sort of present my position on certain things, I don't mind doing that. And if someone is aggressive, I do think it's I could still do it at a degree, even if I am somewhat frustrated. I think I can still communicate my position effectively.
Yes, yes. Just to extend on what you're saying, I'm fascinated with being insufferable with myself, right? When I'm having a disagreement with myself and I'm not being amicable towards myself, my mental health will degrade. It's as if I'm having a disagreement with myself and one of the parts of me are not being, right, charitable. Now, this could extend to other people too, but the real method involves when I'm on the search for, right, learning about something that I don't know and I'm struggling and tackling this inner disagreement, right? I'm having a conflict of beliefs or a conflict of, right, resolving my own intuitions, those kinds of things, or observations. And so that's where the method of, for more linked to mental health, I think relates in the sense that Socratically, right, if I'm using the philosophical method of Socratic thinking, I'm allowing the disagreement to take place. I'm using a strategy that's empathetic towards my hostile aggressor, which I know sounds counterintuitive, but as far as mental health goes, this has been for me the crux of being able to do self-talk and get myself out of negative thought spirals. These thought spirals in my own thinking, right, are an example of me sweeping under the rug disagreements. I don't want to disagree, right? I don't want to have this disagreement, that kind of. So I'm not allowing myself to have the harsh disagreement with myself in an amicable and empathetic way. It's hard. It's not easy to do.
Right. Yeah, I think that is something that's challenging at first, but with time, I think it gets a little bit easier. So for example, I don't know what your experience is in academia, but like all of what I do in parts of my research is always challenged by my colleagues, and it's just a normal, for me, it's become more or less a normal way of life for me because it's my work. But like the difference between how that engagement works in academia as opposed to what's going on in TikTok in these debates are two completely different worlds, right? Because it doesn't come across to me as an egotistical thing, what I experience in my job. It's people that are trying to get to the truth rather than people trying to assert some, I don't know how to explain it, but I think do you see what I'm trying to say here?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm drawing a distinction in methodology towards real life and TikTok versus academia. I notice that there's a tension because in the method of academia, exactly what you're saying, it's hard to sometimes apply those methods into real life, is what I would say. TikTok is like the wild, wild west of real life. Like I get similarities to real life in TikTok, right? When I get in a disagreement with my mom or my girlfriend or my friend, right? There's this dogmatic reasoning that happens. It's not scientific. It's not academic. And for me, that's really frustrating. Like, hey, let's sit down and rationalize this argument. Not everything's going to be rational. And so I've noticed there's a different method. There's a different method going into those environments, right? Which which is ironically the same method, method of inquiry and rationality, but it's just approached slightly different. It's the practice of it. It's not academic. It's not in the armchair philosophy way. It's in the exact way that you're neglecting the things that trigger you. See, the things that you're neglecting that trigger you are the very things that aren't negotiable, that aren't rational in your mind. You could sit and maybe debate a paper about your work all day, but the moment it comes to whatever triggering topic, right, that you can't handle, or for me, we could talk just about myself rather than I'm not really trying to, again, a lot of this is just talking to myself. Like if there was a triggering topic to me, that would be the thing that I would have to focus on, right? Emotionally. The method becomes one of emotional quieting, right? Resolving my own emotions before I can jump into the research, before I can jump into debate. It's way more, it becomes this method way more about like reasoning my own empathy and emotions. Like, I don't know how much, I hope you hear what I'm trying to get at as well.
I think so. So I can understand the desire to want to, I guess, build on that. And I think like, I don't know, like, how do I explain it? Like on here, I think for me, what it is the stimulation from that kind of engagement on TikTok. I don't find it fulfilling for myself. And it's like and a lot of the people that I do encounter, they're talking about things that I just find extremely. For example, like a concept in flat Earth. When I first came on here, I found it interesting to have that discussion. But to me, that topic is somewhat brain dead, and so
Yeah.
I just don't get any stimulation from that kind of conversation.
Imagine if you fell in love with someone who held that position. Mm-hmm. So your approach now, your method to communication with them, I don't think has to resolve around that topic, or I don't know. There has to be an empathetic approach here where that topic is at the center of discussion. You're gonna come at it. Eventually, you're hoping to convince them, right? But you're so in love with the person that you're going to have to come around about it in a very roundabout way, right? You're gonna have to have them over for tea and cook them dinner, watch a movie with them. It's this slow, and then maybe bring up the topic and let it go by, because it's you've noticed it's a triggering topic for them. You could talk all day about Earth, the shapes of Earth, but every time you bring it up, it triggers them. You see? That's the thing you're noticing. It's like the irrationality stems from this inability to actually cooperate communicatively about the topic. It's fascinating when a person bogs themselves in dogmatic thinking. You are more reasonable in the extent you could talk all day about the physics of the Earth. They'll hit their 4 or 5 talking points ends, and now the discussion degrades into personal attacks and irrationality. You see, and that's the same thing that will happen in your everyday life with your loved ones on not topics of physics, but on monotonous things like money or doing the dishes or just who knows, right? It could be literally anything.
Yeah, so I guess like this is why like I'm pretty selective of the people I choose to be in my life, and when it, like if you got to sort of know me in my real life, I'm quite a person that likes to spend time with themselves due to this fact that I feel like it can be somewhat draining to have to deal with things that I consider to be petty. Right, and when it obviously people have different degrees of what pettiness is, but I'm just sort of trying to communicate what I mean here. But like I think it's really difficult for me to imagine that I could fall in love with somebody that genuinely believed the Earth was flat.
I know. I bet it is. I know.
But I could have that conversation with them, and I do think I'm respectful. When I try to probe someone's worldview, and I often try to offer like a respectful approach, but that's not sometimes reciprocated. And when that's not reciprocated, when we're having a discussion, I tend to walk away from it because I find it to be a waste of time.
Okay, so notice. It's less, I think what you're saying there is that it's actually fascinatingly less important that the person has resolved their belief into believing in the flat Earth and more whether they're willing to sit with you respectively for months, years, perhaps decades debating this topic. Like, you to fall in love with the person would be to be mesmerized by their method, not their conclusions. All day, you're the one who's triggered, right? She's triggering you, or he's triggering you into this mode of unreasonability. It's like, that's actually a green flag. They're sitting calmly, they're being hospitable, they're humoring you, right? And they're also, and now you're the one who's triggered. It's like, this is fascinating that really it comes down to the method. Like, the person you would fall in love with who believes in the flat earth would be one who is unbelievably amicable towards your stance and willing to talk all day with you and debate this topic, right? Fascinating and to expose you to ideas you've never heard about, and right, and really push the edges of your understanding, not in a simple-minded flat earth, the average flat earther that you see on TikTok. Like, it would be part of this engaging discussion that you yearn for in a relationship, and that juxtaposition of beliefs would be the very thing keeping that passion going. And from my standpoint, of course, not flat earth specifically, but this clash of worldviews ultimately, I think, is what is responsible for things like love.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? Like, I don't expect someone that I form a relationship, if that ever were to be the case, to be exactly me, you know what I mean, or to mirror me. Like, there's always going to be differences between any individual that you form a relationship with, and it's being able to accept each other's differences, but be able to probe and understand each other, right? And so even if it was someone like a flat earther, that if I happen to fall in love with a flat earther, for me, what I would struggle with is one that isn't willing to engage in a conversation and try to grow. Both of us, not just them, but myself, both being able to grow together, and that's extremely difficult to find, at least. And so I personally don't even bother to even form like a loving relationship, to form a family or something like this, because to me, at this point, I'm not interested in that kind of thing, but I don't know, this is not how I'm going to be for the rest of my life. Maybe I will, I'm not sure, but at the moment my focus is more on self-growth, and I think until I am at a point where I feel open to maybe engaging with people on a sort of, how do I
I think we lost you, Robbie.
What happened? Is it just me, or?
No, it's
okay,
not just
can't hear
you.
me either. Okay.
Sorry, Robbie, you're muted. Maybe you got a phone call.
Not teacupped. I think
True.
his connectivity just went out.
Well, Darth and Coco, thank you for sticking around. Y'all are sick. I'm sorry I didn't say goodbye to everyone else, but thank you for coming up in the panel earlier. That was fun.
Yeah, Logic, I also want to continue our monetary conversation. It's interesting.
Dude, yeah, for sure. Robbie, you're back now. I can hear you.
Oh, sorry, I don't
Don't
know
be.
what happened. Do you have to shut the live down?
No. Continue on what you were saying. I can't exactly remember where you left off, but you were saying something. You were saying something about, you being more prioritized with your own self-growth, right? And maybe in the future, something like a family.
Yeah. In the future, I could be more open to other things. Like I'm curious about other people's worldviews and stuff, and I'm just not at this stage of my life interested in a relationship or an intense relationship with somebody. That might change in the future, but that's kind of more or less where I'm at. So I think, like, as far as like investigating other people's worldviews and having conversations about it, I don't think, for me, it's important to go around and tell people to believe and hold the same morals and hold all of these things that I think in my life are important. I just think, for me, it's more or less exploring somebody else's worldview and just being curious about like what other people think in the world.
Yeah, no,
hope it-
100%. The idea for me is to draw a boundary and insulate myself and have a tight circle of people that appropriate the same method. I don't care about the dogma. I don't care about conclusions or what ideology you believe in. I just want a tight circle of friends who, like you said, are open-minded enough to have a productive discussion, right? If we have differencing of beliefs, that's a green flag. What's a red flag is differencing of method, right? We could talk all day about our differencing of opinion, as long as you can do it respectfully, and somewhat hospitably, right? Have me over and cook me dinner, and let's watch a movie together. Let's not always be grilling each other on our ideas, and that those friendships are ultimately a method, like, because the happy silences and the comical, right, the comedy, the comic relief, all those things are earned to a certain respect, right? It takes a certain method and frame of mind to realize the opportunity for humor or for appreciating little moments that you might otherwise miss, right? So the method here, I think, does become one, again, of aligning myself with, empathy towards myself, right? The self-help thing is what I'm talking about as well. It's like, I have to be empathetic towards myself. If I'm always neurotically judging myself and not letting myself move on from, what I did yesterday, what I should have done, what I could do better tomorrow, and to stop and smell the flowers and grab some flowers on the way home from my girlfriend, right? They're two different methods. And one seems a little irrational, like to take my time up with meaningless things like grabbing flowers is to practice relaxing on my neurotic loop thinking, trying to resolve all the problems in my life.
Yeah, dude. I think that self-talk is super important. Like the thing is my criticism towards myself is extreme, and
Right, me too.
And I think when it comes to my self-talk, what I do not need is other people's perspectives of myself to have some kind of meaning in my head, or to drive some kind of negative thoughts that I would spiral down into a negative state of thinking. So for me, the reason why I don't engage in people that are with people that are not respectful in some of these things. I mean, I do engage with people and I'm prepared for it, but the thing is that I don't subject myself to these situations because of my mental state. And I think that's why I think for me, I do sit on the side and like live vicariously through my friends like Darth up there.
Right.
But he's got that mindset that he could maintain positivity about himself when people say negative things about him. Whereas me, I already don't say nice things about myself, and I don't need other people to say negative things about myself. And if I allow that into my mind, it's just going to have catastrophic consequences.
I hope you hear my response as affirming what you said, because everything you said there was great. I just view you differently. It's funny how resilient I see you as. You are on here practicing as well, man. And I think that you are building resilience, and you are in the ring just as much as any of us. And slowly but surely, your armor is shielding you. You're insulating yourself. When you say, that there's this potential to be uprooted mentally by someone else's perspective, I don't entirely believe you, because maybe there are some areas, right, that you know better than me. I don't know you personally, but overall, your education and your rational mind makes you very, very resilient, Robbie. You have the armor and the method, right? You're employing it every day in your work. You are actually, compared to most people on the planet, the top percentage of the ability, right, to rationalize. At this point, it's not ability. It's not the problem of rationalizing. It's a problem of emotional stability. You could deal with any problem of logic. You could compare any ideology and research anything you wanted to and learn with academics. So when it comes to insulating yourself from someone else's interrogation of your psychology, bro, you have the insulation from that, right? You definitely have it. It's smart also, like you said, to draw a boundary and not subject yourself to unnecessary, obviously, right? Obviously, you don't want to be exposed to unnecessary penetrations. But bro, for the most part, you're in the battlefield, taking W's right, left, and center, right? As far as this goes, like, you don't need to feel fragile in any sense, I don't think.
Yeah, dude, and I really appreciate your words. And I think the problem with being neurodivergent is that this is something that is that I really need to work on, right? And I'm sorry that it's come to this, and I've kind of exposed myself a little bit here with regards to my mental health. But I see,
bro.
like,
I'm talking about my mental
see,
health as much as you are.
right, and I think that's the thing, right? Like, I think I do have like the skills that I've to apply critical doing like analysis and applying critical thinking and being like rational. And I'm grateful for this, but I think for me, when it comes to mental health, it goes a little bit deeper than that, and that's something that it seems strange, but it's something I need help with. You know what I mean? And I think, like, for the most part, these discussions, when it comes to these things, I like to only engage with people that are being honest and that are really keen to explore in an honest way other people's worldviews, rather than them trying to attack me personally. And that's what I mean. What I do is I keep myself out of those conversations where I can.
Smart. Yeah, that's smart. You don't want to waste time.
But I was going to challenge Robbie's perception of himself and his worldview dishonestly, so I guess I better drop.
Yeah, right. Oh, man.
You can just look at your name.
I'm totally kidding.
You're anything but.
Just call me an anything but?
Some of my mental health issues, inevitably, I think, were a result of academia, because my rational method wasn't fully being employed. I saw it for what it was academically, but then I couldn't reconcile the method of what was going on in school with my everyday life. I struggled with this for many years, man. And the grasping at the comedic relief is a gift that sometimes isn't given through education. We don't understand how much, right, our learning abilities are a gift of reconciling your neuroticism. It's actually, that's the tool. It's not to pass a test or get a job. It's not to solve an equation or make an innovation or make a bunch of money. The real education, the real transcendent lesson to give everyone is this emotional stability. This ability to, once you have critical thinking, you need to now be able to deal with it. Once you're given the gift of critical thinking, which is what school gives everyone, they don't give you the gift of how to deal with it. You have this weapon in front of you you don't have any safety on the weapon. And you've never really been shown how to actually, like, utilize it, right, in a way that is on the ground level, not on a test, but in the danger of real life. And that's, I think, something that, again, I'm not lecturing Robbie, I'm talking to myself here. I had to go through the stages of rediscovering humor, rediscovering the fact that actually my rational method allows me to see things like humor better than the average person who doesn't have these things. My neuroticism is just limiting me, right, to employ the rational method in the way that actually works practically to solve the problem of whether or not I should do the dishes with my girlfriend in an actual productive way, not having the same disagreement every single freaking night for 17 years until one of us leave each other, right? Actually solving the problem. That's not going to come from some empirical decision or some schedule on who does the dishes, right? Maybe some of those can alleviate the tension, but the tension comes from comedic relief, and comedic relief has to do with this like reconciling your neuroticism. You can't come to the conclusion. You need to relax that search, and you need to be okay with the uncertainty. The same way that when we work in academia, that is the method, right? That's the curious discovery of new knowledge. We have to employ our humility. We have to employ that, but we don't do it in our everyday life. Why is that? It's harder said than done. It's
Wait, can I
easier
ask
said
you a
than
question?
done. Yeah, please do.
Why
I'm
would
preaching.
a man ever do the dishes?
Man, that's a funny comment. I had the dishes is a sensitive one for me because my mom always did the dishes. When I grew up, my mom always did them.
It's like a wonderful mom.
She is, and but now when I grow up, I see the lack of her presence in every space where the dishes aren't done. I want to do them. I want to do them for her, right? So this point, it's like a gift she's given me that like,
Or a curse.
no, it's a gift. It's a gift. I'm happy to do the dishes, bro. Like
No,
when
I joke. I always do the dishes.
right. Like when I traveled, it was one of the best gifts ever, right? To be able to, when I'm being put up, to be able to do the dishes and have everyone understand my gratuity through that action, and then like have that with my mom as present, bro.
You want to hear something funny?
Go ahead.
So I it's not particularly earth conscious of me, but I literally we use just good paper plates and we just throw them out. We don't do
Good
dishes.
strategy. Yeah, that's a good strategy.
We're like use and toss.
Well, that's a lot
Yeah.
of waste.
There's an island of garbage floating in the middle of the ocean, right?
Yeah, but it's not paper garbage. It's plastic.
I think it's called Puerto Rico.
So right now, when my dishwasher breaks, I just, fix it and just wash the dishes by hand. My grandpa, however, he said when the dishwasher broke, you just slapped her on the butt and said, get back to work.
I literally, I have like one, we have a bunch of them, but I only keep like one spoon, fork, and knife out. And I just use it and wash it and put it on the thing and wait for the next time I need to use it.
Yeah, well, I got kids.
If
I actually
I'm
love
so
when
sorry, Flint.
I don't know what
I'm
I
so
would do
sorry.
if I had
Did you hear how I
kids,
said it? I
It's a
got
whole,
kids.
yeah, that's a whole
Gotta
different situation. Yeah.
if I go over to my girlfriend's grandparents' house and they cook a huge meal for us, and I then offer to do the dishes for them, and I pump it out really fast, right? Like I get them done in an impressive way really fast, because doing the dishes is a skill, and it's not easy. It's kind of gross. It's not easy, right? Especially in a new kitchen, etc. I think that it's like one of the most like polite things you could do as a guest to really show your gratuity.
I would never let a guest do dishes at my house, though.
Yeah, that's fair too. Like I don't want to.
Unless it's like Thanksgiving and there's just like a ton of them, then yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it depends on the
Rinse
setting.
it off. If they rinse it off and put it on the sink, then that's different. But if like you're doing like all my dishes, bro, chill. Just relax.
I know what you mean. But yeah, if it's overkill, it depends on the setting. You got to read the room. But I'm just saying, there's been definitely.
Now, if you start vacuuming or like dusting or something, I'll let you.
Pulling out the plunger. Yeah. I actually loved when my dishwasher broke yesterday and I got to spend a good chunk of the day fixing it. That was a hell of a lot of fun. I'm like, how does this thing work? I think it works now. Maybe. It's fun to take it apart and use your tools that you spent all that money on.
Ultimately, the dishes are just a metaphor, right? It's a metaphor for I guess, without sounding too cliche, chaos. It's again employing this method of what are you gonna do when chaos, when shit hits the fan? How are you? See, you don't.
You get
I
to
don't really
work.
care how you act right now in a pleasant setting. I care how you act when shit hits the fan. How calm do you stay, and how rational are you? How able are you to actually solve the problem? Right?
I really want to know is who keeps shitting in these fans?
We all do. Tiny, you've shit in a couple fans. Let's be honest. Shit has hit the fan in and around you. Have you ever been in that state of mind where shit just...
My life is completely balanced, very equitable. My lives are never chaos. This never happens to me.
Have you ever had the situation where shit hits the fan and then for some reason it just does not stop? Like, to the point of like the jacket getting caught on the door, the keys being lost, and then like hitting your head, and then like, and then it just like never ends. Oh, it's bad.
Yeah, it's like Murphy's Law.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is. Yeah. Yeah, so I feel like the people who get themselves out of those situations faster than others have a strategy, right? Like, it's a skill. It's kind of like a skill set. Some people, bro, live their lives like that. Some people live their lives like that. Just every single thing they do is, right, a fucking 2 steps backwards, 1 step forward every single time. It's kind of funny, but it's not.
I'm trying to think of a time when the shit hit the fan. And I'm not really coming up with anything that's like worthy of sharing with other people.
Oh, well, that is that because
You know.
the examples are either really bad or like
No, they're just I think people would disagree. I'm like,
So, I have a question. What happens when like the shit hits a Dyson? Like one of those Dyson like oval things? Would that do anything?
just shoots it. It becomes a shit gun.
Cannon.
Yeah, shit cannon. Thank you. Yes, very good. Yeah.
Glad I could be here to ask the important questions, you know? I think the way that we all cope with things, like we all try to adapt different ways. I love comedy because it helps, like having a sense of humor. You can just laugh stuff off and be like, this fucking moron. You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes.
But that's a
It depends.
freaking skill, Tiny. That's a skill. Like, you got to practice that. Like, if you're not around people that are naturally funny, right? If you're not exposed to humor all the time, you're going to be an uptight person.
Yeah.
It's a skill. Like, you have to practice it day in and day out, and then slowly but surely things get funnier. And then it's like, holy shit, this is actually working. Just like learning math or something else.
I mean, trying to have a perspective on things is important too, right? People get into this catastrophizing mode where everything is a huge deal, and they see a butterfly effect and everything. Like, if they don't do this, then their life's gonna fall apart.
Oh, the irony, right?
Yeah.
Oh, the irony, because it is but it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It is a butterfly
Yeah, but you
effect.
can't predict which is the butterfly, right?
Exactly. So that becomes their neuroticism creates this self-fulfilling, right? Nothing. It's paralysis analysis again. It's like you're concentrating on all these non-factors, and the real factor is you being unfocused and not getting anything done.
Yeah, like my dad will spend like 20 minutes in a store comparing socks to buy. And he's just like agonizing over like not just what's the best deal, but like how long they're gonna last and what occasions they're appropriate for and all this stuff. And I'm just like, what the fuck, man? Just grab one and throw it in the bin. Like, I don't understand how people just agonize over these issues. But then, the reverse of that is, when he goes to make an important decision, he like thinks through contemplates all the ifs, and I just like, wing it.
Okay, so see, this is a great example, bro. The term agonizing was important there, because if you're in the store with your dad and he's shopping through socks, he's taking 20 minutes and it's agonizing. What the hell are we doing in this store, bro? Right? Whereas a related issue would be like me going shopping with my girlfriend. I don't like shopping, right? But in order to humor it's not about buying stuff. It's about walking around. Shopping's about walking around, looking at all the socks and humoring all the oh, look at the little detail. Oh, I wonder where I'd wear these socks. And if it's not insufferable, then that process becomes actually quite enjoyable, right? Shopping and looking at socks can be quite funny and fun. You could do it all day if you're a sock enthusiast. But the problem is this insufferability. It's the method. It's like, okay, we've been standing here for 20 minutes. You're half rushing. You're half, taking your time. Like the parking meter's running out. What are we doing? We didn't plan on this. Just buy some freaking socks. It becomes this whole experience of like, yeah. So it's interesting how it doesn't, even on something as small as socks, who cares? It could actually still be a topic of interest that could fill a whole day or a whole, right? Sock shopping could be actually a fun day activity, especially budget wise and everything. It could be actually a really entertaining thing to embrace, but it's this method. It's like, how are we going to do it? Are we going to do it and every single thing we do is insufferable? The parking, how are we going to get there? Or are we going to enjoy it and take our time with it and smell the flowers the whole way, right? And really embrace sock shopping.
Yeah. Yeah, but then like one of his friends has a son who's on the spectrum, and they went over because they all play golf, and they went over to his son's house, and his son showed him this bookcase that was full of these notebooks, and he showed him the notebooks, and just one day he just started writing all of the numbers, and it's just 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's just all of these notebooks are just filled with the next number in the sequence, and he has to do that until he like can calm down enough to like go about on his day.
Right.
And that's like he was because my dad's a philosophy professor, and he was asking him like about he wrote a book on the meaning of life, and he was like, is this meaningful, right? So they just had an interesting discussion about like what some people think is meaningless, other people find, deeply meaningful or important to them. But it's kind of crazy to see like this bookshelf just full of numbers. And he's like, is it really any different than how other people spend their life if they're, they've got some hobby that they do or some other interest? Is it really all that different than just filling a book with numbers?
Right. Yeah, the method, if filling books with numbers is a good method for you to stabilize your emotions, then the meaning behind that is very valuable, regardless of the outcome. Right? The outcome of the bookshelves full of numbers may or may not be meaningful, but the real meaning, the true meaning, is the emotional stability. If
you're saying we shouldn't have made fun of him? Yeah.
Nonetheless, you can still crack a few jokes in there.
Because we found a lot of meaning in mocking him.
Sure. As we all do, our ignorance is shown through humor. That's why humor is such a funny one, because at the end of the day, to really harness it, you have to be humble. It's a really good test of humility, right? Humor is the number one. You can't get the joke. You don't get the joke. If you look at a good meme, memes, from my standpoint, always seem to the real viral ones. They always catch both sides of the argument. So if you're on a political meme, well, if the left looks at it, they'll see it one way, and if the right looks at it, they'll see it the other way. And the meme captures both positions perfectly, making it viral, right? Because one shares it towards their bias, the other shares it towards their bias, and it's the true troll. The troll stands in the middle while both fight over the problem. And that's how it generates this viral meme. I think comedy is the same way. Like a true comedian, right, sort of runs down the fence line so elegantly that no one even notices. It's like he's not standing on the fence. He's just dancing on the fence now. You know, it's an interesting game to play. Again, takes a lot of practice.
So it's like virtuous trolling.
Well, I suppose virtue is one way of looking at it, because it's just understanding. It's like you can't see the full meme or troll. Like I'll see the same, like I knew this was happening when I saw, advocates of either side of the political spectrum sharing the same meme. And so that made me ponder, holy shit, regardless of how you look at this meme, it's actually targeting both our audiences. And so from the troll's perspective, you have to be right so on the outside that you see the meta meme. You see that the meme has its meaning, but then there's this meta phenomenon going on, which is that the virality of the meme doesn't really depend on the content. It depends on its ability to leverage both sides of an argument, which is the rational method in comedy, going all the way back to what I was saying about employing these methods in an applicable way. Like, I think a comedian has to logically put together their jokes, but then what is delivery, timing, stage presence, confidence, and focus? What is all that? That's not logic. That has nothing to do with writing good jokes. You could be an excellent joke writer. Good luck getting up on the stage and actually delivering the jokes. And this has to do with employing, it's funny, they have to employ the same method, and it's what it is. What is it? It's emotional stability, right? The moment you get insecure, unconfident, or you don't play your shtick, you forget your lines, right? Or you lose the crowd's interest, all these kinds of things. They have to not only tell the jokes well, and there's that whole methodology, but then there's a stage presence methodology, a state of mind, where they have to meditatively enter into a presence of mind, which allows them to flow on stage with the mic and reiterate and crowd read and all those skills, all those things. It's the same thing as working in an environment with your loved ones at the table, right? It's the same thing. It's the same skill set, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, I gotta go wash dishes. It's a good chat with you.
Yeah, gang, Flenser. Thanks for coming up, bro.
Baller.
I've been rambling so much. I don't know if Darth, you want to go back to the money thing, if Tiny has anything to say, or if Robbie has anything to say. I'm down to take this anyway.
I just wanted to say, sense of humor, it can be, pivotal to understanding things. I think it's very important, especially when it comes to, mental health. I think that's one of the biggest components of having stable mental health. It's just being able to laugh instead of just letting it bother you or get stuck in your head, stuff like that. Does that make sense?
You're nailing it on the head, but if finding the humor, you're nailing it, Tiny. It's crazy to me how much of a skill that is. You have to find the humor. If you're good at this, you'll be laughing at things that most people don't see as funny, because you're catching humor. You have this intuition to humor that relieves the tension. You have an intuition of humor that relieves the tension for you and no one else. How interesting that a practice could build this method of tension release, right? That some people are deficient in, never getting the joke, right? Never seeing how it's funny.
I think though there's a difference between humor and cosplaying as a precept, Darth. That's true.
Although there are humorous elements.
It's cool. I'm just giving him shit. I was doing that shit too, so it's all good.
Well, I'm sorry to say that the true comedy for me stands all the way at the back of the room, because to watch a bunch of atheists, right, continuously, unironically mock this, it becomes almost back to irony again. It's the reason I keep coming back on this app. That kind of humor is there's so many layers to it that I love it. I absolutely love it. To see someone like Slurms defending that argument against belligerent atheists coming up. It like the irony, the layers of irony are just not lost on me. It's amazing. It's true culture.
Hilarious, and he like does it immaculately too. He knows the script.
Oh yeah, like when people are actually
So does
convinced. Yeah, when people are actually convinced that you guys are defending the argument, they don't know who you are. It's a perfect trap, right? It's just so perfect. But then again, the irony is not lost on me that like the reason it's easily replicable is because of somewhat to the degree of the strength of the argument. I don't love tag, but it's reputable. It's easily reputable in this way that seems, it makes even an atheist who's thought about these things somewhat step back in their tracks, right? This is again not lost on me, not because of the content always, it's because of the method, right? If a good comedian doesn't ever really have to tell a joke, right? Because their punchlines are in the delivery, and it's the same with a precept. If you're a good precept, you're employing the method more than you are the substance, right? You're either cutting someone off,
Right.
you're right, and this method is not lost on me. That irony, that's what Slurms employs in his when he's replicating it. So why is it strong? Why does it work? Well, because of the method, not because of the substance. That's so good. Like, I think more academics need to employ this. More academics need to realize this. I think this is lost a bit in academia. Again, super ironic because it's science and academia and institutionalization is all about methodology, but yet employing the practice of it is a different skill. Like recognizing the humor and being emotionally stable enough to see the humor. Someone like Precept Mars gets the joke, I think, right? He's actually stoic enough, or like, I don't know, apathetic enough that he can like enter into these areas where he just gets humiliated, but trudges through like an absolute tank. And it's again a methodology that, if we want to call it that, resilience of mind, right, is due not to the substance, not to his conclusions, and yet he seems quite conclusive. Like he's well read, he's curious, he does his research and things, but his method is unmatched, right, in that apathetic approach to just tanking through as the arrows are being shot, just absolutely tanking through.
I think that
are hilarious.
yeah, I like Precept actually. I think he's funny. I just don't like it when he insults my friends. But what I did want to say, is that I do think in academia, like in the professional side of things, they do keep it pretty serious, right? And so they do have like rules and regulations of the institute on how you should treat your fellow researchers. But I think like when it comes to like people's personal lives, I do think a lot of academic people actually have humor, at least the ones that I'm around. I think people have this misconception that because you engage in academic research that you're not funny, or that you don't like humor. But I think it's a bit of a stereotype, I think.
Okay. I love that response. There's a difference between being funny and getting jokes sometimes and being a master of comedy, right? You could be a funny person, but if a joke offends you, well, now you're using the inappropriate method. So
that's up to the person interpreting the joke too.
Yeah, so I don't think that holds true only for academic people. I mean, academic people can also engage in stand-up comedy. Like one of my professors used to be a stand-up comedian. I think the thing is, it's not. What I'm trying to say is that it's not just in academia. It's people in all sorts of fields or any line of work that struggle to understand humor and comedy, right? So
that's true.
At least for me, when I go out and I engage in these. Not everybody is a professional stand-up comedian, but I mean, like, I think depending on like what your core beliefs are, I think that usually dictates whether someone finds something funny or not. And so that's different to what your line of work is, I think.
No, you're spot on, Robbie. You're absolutely spot on. The cringe factor for me is that academia, the reason I target academia is because it's this whole agenda to popularize rationality, I suppose, and critical thinking. Like, our educational institutions are trying to popularize critical thinking. Would you agree with that? Like, right down to the elementary level.
I don't know. I think like they have like universities and schools for me, going to university was a choice, right? I wasn't forced to do it. But I think like people like to go out and engage in like intellectual conversation. I don't know I don't know.
But what's the point of school? What do you think the point of like early education is?
So for me, it is to prepare someone when they do, if they want to go to school or if their parents send them to school, is to prepare them with some of the necessary skills it takes to do simple tasks in your day-to-day life. Some people might disagree with that.
Okay.
School wasn't for me.
Okay.
School wasn't for me when I was a kid. I hated school, actually, because it didn't cater to my mental health issues. And so for me, it wasn't until I was older that I was able to then go back and do and learn. So I don't know. It just kind of depends on each place or each individual, their circumstances, I think.
That's very true. That's very true. Yeah, each individual is going to be at their own on their own path and at their own pace with all of this. Education is not a linear thing. But to say that, you know, at the end of the day, I want to send my kid to school to get them a good education. I'm hoping that at the end of it, the mere minimal result would be their mental health. Not only are they going to get a job, right, and a good career and all those things, but mental health would be presumably one of the biggest indicators. If every time they come back from their education, they're depressed and they loathe it and they hate it, well, that's a bit of a red flag for me, right? Because I'm down to discipline. I'm down to teach discipline, and I'm down to teach scheduling and all those things. But again, I don't know how much results, you know, are measurable if not mental health. And so that's the thing that's the very thing I'm kind of critiquing here is that it seems like the method that's being taught in school is not being reconciled with the mental health component of it. It's not as if math and logic and history and science and all these fascinating things aren't related to our mental health. They very much are. In fact, the people doing, like you're saying, the very work in these fields are usually mentally resilient. There's a pattern there, right? So the method, it seems like the method of rational thinking, critical thinking, problem solving, pattern recognition also relates to mental health. It's just that we weren't taught that.
Yeah, I think like the thing is like in my generation, right, mental health wasn't taken so seriously. Like slowly over at least the last few decades, I've seen a lot more awareness towards mental health. But that's one of the problems that I have even with myself, right, when it comes to like me reaching out for professional help, is that the way I was raised and the thoughts that I had. So I was brought up in a family like, stop being a wimp, you know, what are you being so emotional about? Just, you know, grind through it, be a man, all this kind of toxic bullshit. Now, when I'm dealing with my mental health, I'm realizing that this whole, the whole thought process in my brain is negatively impacting my physical health and my mental health. And so it's taken a lot of work for me to process and deal with it, and to, you know, stop trying to pretend everything is okay when it's not. And so that's the that's one aspect of me having to requiring professional help, and that wasn't when I was coming up. That wasn't taught to us at school. So I do agree. I think more attention needs to be focused on these issues. I don't know if them being taught in school is going to solve the issue, but I think it would help, and people being more aware of these things. And I do think that's the case in schools these days. It's awareness around these topics are becoming more available to people, and I think they are being brought up in school, and I think like teachers and people like that are paying more attention to these issues.
You're very right. Things are changing. It wasn't as popularized before, and what really irritates me though is that they're not reconciled. The lessons aren't being reconciled with mental health. Math is a mental health course, right? We're not approaching. We're trying to separate out science and math and art, and then mental health. Go to your counselor. What I'm trying to say and what I'm trying to popularize is that these methods of knowledge and curiosity are all one, right? And they're all related to mental health. It doesn't matter which topic you approach. It's all going to require a baseline of mental health, which is reasoning, rationality.
Right. So I agree that maths enables you to engage in like problem solving, critical thinking, and all of these things. For me, learning about mental health, like obviously maths is a tool that can be used to quantify things, right? To quantify and can be used in the area of research related to psychology or any sort of related field to mental health. But I think exercising one's brain and teaching them to problem solve and apply critical thinking, I'm not sure if that fixes the problem of mental health, right? Because I've gone through the whole academic system, right? I know how to apply critical thinking. I know how to be rational, yet I still suffer from mental health. And so for me, learning these skills are helpful in certain areas, but mental health I think, is a lot more deeper than just critical and rational thought.
I would say difficult. I would say more difficult.
Yeah, exactly.
Straight up.
And so for me, the education and the awareness, I think, needs to be brought up in schools to just at least be more catering towards people that do have mental health issues.
So math, one of the reasons I bring up math is because a lot of kids hate math. I did as a kid. And I think this is a perfect testing ground for resilience of mind. Yes, you got to be a good teacher who gets the kids curious about math, but what is math really? It's a test of patience, pattern recognition, right? Intelligibility, whatever word you want to throw on it. So when you have a bunch of students who aren't interested in math, is that more of a testament to, right? Is that more of a testament to, like, when we say, look at all these young boys who have ADHD, they won't sit down in their desks and learn math. It's like, yes, because they do not. They're fragile in their thinking. They don't even have. They're a goldfish, right? They don't even have 30 seconds of memory to, right? You have to incrementally work up to the point where they can patiently sit down and learn math. There's levels to this. You can't be running around the room throwing things while he's learning his multiplication tables. There's an etiquette, right? A method to learning math. So math is just a great example of teaching this anti-fragility of mind that, hey, if you're going to learn math, you have to be ultimately really humble and curious. And basically, this is a lifelong journey of learning a different language, right? You have to get a kid to be invested in that, which is like a huge testament of mental stability. You can't just casually teach them, like, I don't think you can just casually teach them a bit of arithmetic and expect them to even care at all about it.
Well, that's the problem, right? I think, like, not everybody likes mathematics and not everybody is even interested in doing mathematics. So for me, it's not, I think, like, what I find the problem in educational systems is that they only have, well, most of them are trying to cater for different areas of the world and where they can give you like the foundations for you to use and grow upon. But I think that's, I think that's why it's important that people have a variety of options on things so they can explore and see what's interesting for them, and then decide which of those areas they want to invest their time and their, think about how they want to use that education to direct them into their career or future. Now,
Yes.
for me, the problem is that when I was at school, I couldn't even see a week ahead. And so it's so difficult to sort of get somebody like me as a kid to think about my future, think about like what's important, how am I going to survive in the so-called real world, right? And so I think that's it's easy said than done. And often what I've found is the problems aren't so much as being a problem of the school or the educational system, although I do think these do need some growth and, some growth and improvements. But for me, it's more or less the home by which children have to go home to and the houses where they're living. So some people live in abusive families and have struggle. And this is where I think the root of the problems are. And I don't know the solution as to how you can get somebody who is suffering at home, go to school and to focus on the work that they have to do, the homework and the education system. And this is something that's extremely difficult to deal with in society. And I don't know what the solution is, but I'm glad that there are people trying to fix this problem.
So you said so many good things there. I just want to respond to a couple things. First of all, when I have a method for learning about things I don't care about. Yes, it's good to strategize my passions into my career and use my education towards the things I love and what I'm curious about. But I'm also trying to say that the most important application of our education is towards the things we don't, the things we neglect. For instance, math. Or in my case, another instance would be earlier the idea of sock shopping was brought up. That would be a good one. Oh, but another one would be humoring my girlfriend when we watch shows I don't give a shit about. Right? I'm going to now sit down for an hour, watch some reality show that I don't care about, and not only that, I'm actually going to care about it. For that hour, I can be fully invested, learn about the characters just as much as she does, and actually maybe even start to like it. Right? Maybe even be a little more interested. So next time when we watch an episode, I might actually enjoy it a little more. And so this method, though, comes down to embracing that which you do not know and that which makes you uncomfortable and that which you are going to fail at and that which you don't like, and et cetera, et cetera. The foods you don't like, the languages you don't understand, all these things, right? All the disillusionary objects of your knowledge, the things you don't know. And that's sort of, for me, I think you're right to the sense that, it's really important about home, what goes on at home. And it used to be that our education system sort of was this idea of, well, if we educate, then the home will be more tolerant and right, and educational, right? If mom and dad are educated, then the kids are going to be in a better home. So there is this element of like institutionalizing the idea of homemaking, right? But without the nuclear family or that idea, education somewhat lost its presence of like, what are we trying to achieve if there isn't a home body that we're aiming at with our education. And education's it's a path in itself, right, away from home. Then I start to question where the application's going, especially for the mental health of the people involved, because ultimately I don't think the quest for knowledge is something that can be gained, through your career, or through achieving a credential or anything like that. It's going to be something like, your own inner peace or your own fulfillment, those kinds of I don't know, untangible things that are somewhat metaphors. So so again, I think the biggest thing I'm trying to say here is that, education today is getting cheaper by the dime, and the idea of critical thinking can be popularized to people at home. Adults today don't need to go get a university education to understand practical applications of rationality and critical thinking in their everyday life. How to enjoy a sitcom with your girlfriend, how to do the dishes better, how to take responsibility for your finances. All these key things that seem like massive problems to institutionalize are actually methodologically fairly simple to teach, right? We don't have to teach individually, neurotically, and micromanage we don't have to have a dishes course, right? Where people now have to go learn how to do dishes and pay $100 to get a credential to be a dishwasher. No, everyone can do dishes. It's about applying yourself and getting your elbows dirty a little bit. And that's real life, right? And so to employ those functional, real applications of education is not expensive, and it's not something that needs to be taken back to, the institutions. I think it can be spread through even comedies, spread through shows, anything really. Like, I think it can be popularized through many mediums, and I think it is being popularized, to your point earlier about mental health becoming more of a frontline conversation. Like, that's, I think, a result not of the institutions, but like you're saying, these grassroots or home body implementations of them. I talked so much.
Yeah, that's a thing, right? Like, there are some parts where I think just the number of children there are that have to go through the school system, or even like the options to have like universities, or not even universities, any kind of institute that wants to, teach something. Like, you have these spiritual camps. I'm not a spiritual person myself, but they have these workshops that you can participate in. So I think if you are looking to grow as an individual, if you search, there are places and opportunities out there. But the thing is I think the core mindset of one individual, I think, stems from one's upbringing and their parents, and how that seems to be like the first lessons that people get when they're children, right? And so there is some responsibility that falls on the parents to be good parents. Whether some people are in unfortunate circumstances where they can't, where their parents haven't been there to help them get the foundational growth they need as children, is the problem that I'm specifically pointing at. And so I think the schools and educational opportunities are actually out there in the world. Not everybody has access to all of them, which I think is unfortunate. But if I think if the parents can do what they can to give their child the best chance at life, I think that's great. I didn't fall into those types of circumstances, unfortunately, but my parents at least tried to help me figure out and work my way through so that I can work it out for myself, despite the challenges that I faced as a child.
Absolutely. Like, just to impose my own sort of anecdotal experience here, like, my parents are both teachers. They taught their whole life. My mom taught math, and when I talk to them now about, if I ask them what is logic, and how does it apply to your everyday life, they don't have a clear answer. Now, I don't judge them for that, right? It's all good. I know I'm putting them on the spot. I don't expect them to, like, give me some crazy answer, but I have an answer, right? And it is just a method for emotional stability. So what you're learning, my answer, like, when I watch my mom, right, devolve into emotional instability without a thought in her mind that, hey, these math lessons you've been teaching your whole life relate to rationality, which also relates to your emotional stability. But I know you don't see them as connected, but they actually are, is fascinating to me. I'm perplexed by that irony, dissonance, and widespread, I would say, dissonance. Maybe it's a generational thing. My mom's a boomer, but I don't think she's rare in this reality. I don't think she's rare in this. I think there's a lot of emotionally unstable people that, understand literature and academia, but don't utilize it in their everyday life, and don't see the connection, don't see how those things are connected.
Yeah, I think so. For me, the thing for me is that I engage in throughout my job, throughout my research and the things that I apply and the skills that I've developed in rational thought. Right, that's what I utilize for my job. When it comes to my mental health, though, like that, there's no amount of rationalization I can do to fix my neurodivergency, right? It's something that I'm going to have to deal with for the rest of my life. But there are procedures by which I can implement strategies. So it is helpful in that sense. It helps me to apply thought and how I work on strategies to improve and minimize, minimize the, let's say, consequences that come from my neurodivergency, right? So that I don't do anything hurtful towards myself or in another case towards other people. So there's a difference between mental health regarding what the issue is, the physical makeup of my brain, in comparison to my way of dealing with mental, applying critical thought or
Absolutely.
whatever it is
Yes.
to implement those strategies.
So you're absolutely right. I'm not disagreeing with you, but there's a nuance. There is a nuance there, which is that I do think different methods of thinking can change the psychology fundamentally of a person, and these can be appropriated not biologically or through intervention, simply by education. That's what the education system is doing ultimately, right? It's trying to implement some method, I would call it critical thinking, into the population. So this method's we're not doing a surgery, we're not giving anyone pills, we're trying to teach them, and even regardless of their mental dispositions, we're trying to change that to the degree of at least being critical thinkers, right?
Yeah, so I think it helps people cope with it easier if you are able to implement strategies. Like for me, I need professional help, right? So that's why I seek out counseling to help me manage these things a lot better, because on my own it was catastrophic. And so these are the things. Like I'm still someone who applies rational thinking in my day-to-day life, but when it comes to mental health, there is a part of my brain that is irrational, and I don't know, if I see that as a negative thing. It's just who I am. I accept. I'm trying to accept myself for who I am, but I do trick myself into think. It's hard to explain, but to trick myself into thinking things are okay. And I'm really good at this. My brain is really good at being somewhat, how do I say, pretending situations are okay when it's not. And then when we get into the core of it, this is where people who are outside and are professionals and at navigating these issues are able to help me figure out trigger warnings and signs by which that could lead me into a depressive episode. And once I do get into this emotional negative state, it's really hard for me to get out of it. So I need to put up safety nets and strategies to avoid that.
Yeah, and one thing to understand, I think maybe logic is you can't rationally. There's this misunderstand. A large part of the population kind of misunderstands what happens when you have things like depression and things like that, and they think, oh, you can logic your way out of it, or you can rationally think your way out of it, and it's just not the case.
That is my claim here, but I hope you guys can sympathize with why I'm saying that.
I mean, I'm one of the most quote unquote rational people I know, and I've had, and I have had bouts, periods of time where irrationality ruled the day, regardless of my attempts to override it with rational thinking. So, in particular,
What do you think? What do you
Preston
think I would say to this? What do you think my response to this is going to be?
Not sure.
I'm interested in the method.
Yeah.
Right.
So the only thing I could do to, and by the way, I live with a professional, so I was fully informed. And the only thing you can do is just sort of like say, this is just temporary. That's about all you can convince yourself of to deal with it.
And do you see that as not? You see that as like, okay, wait. You see that as somewhat abandoning rationality.
Well, rationality could not affect the experience.
So
Not sure
I
how to
think Darth is
describe
on the
it.
right path here. Like, so when that's the thing, right? Like, I think this is the hugest misconception about mental health, right? And this is what I was trying to say to you before is that you toughen up. Just deal with it. You can rationalize your way out of it. That's the thing is it's not as simple as rationalizing your way
Okay.
out of such situations. And so
I agree.
the thing,
I agree.
like it's a real let's say, I don't like using this word, but it is a maybe disease is not a good word here, but it's not it's the same with someone that has like bipolar or ADHD, which I also have as well. But these mental health issues that people are dealing with are a struggle, and it's something that no amount of rationality I can apply can pull me out of a depressive
sort of
episode.
Logic. It's sort of like, say, what you're trying to do, I think, is something like, your car has a flat tire and you're going to rationalize your way into getting your car to work correctly.
Okay. Steelman, I hope you guys can hear what I'm saying fully, because you know that I'm not quite saying pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right? And I agree with you that anyone who says that rationally, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps rationally, right? That's not quite what I'm saying. Just try to steelman fully what I'm saying.
If I understand you, it's like if you are educated and you are able to apply critical thought in your life, you are able to maybe deal with these situations a lot easier. This is more or less what I understood from what you were communicating across to me. And I agree with you there, if that is the case.
And so that's pretty much it. But to really drive it home with Darth's example of the car breaking down, what the method here, what the conclusion wouldn't be fixing the car, would it? It would be emotional stability. The car has to be a secondary thing. We're going to fix the car. But first, I got to calm down. So that the method of rationality is not to solve the problem. You're never going to employ it in a way to solve the problem.
I think maybe
problem is
I'm not
emotional.
sure I'm not sure you are. Let's revisit the analogy, because I'm not sure you understood my analogy. Basically, I was saying it's a category error to say that you can rationalize your way out of a problem, which is not a rational problem.
Okay, so fixing the car then now I
The
did
car
lose you.
has a flat whether you like it or not. There's nothing you can do about it.
Oh, I see.
And
Okay.
so there's no way you're going to rationally convince your car to work properly.
That's right. And so you're trying to show the limitation of rationality in that point, because you can't
Right.
fix the car.
Yeah,
And I'm saying
exactly.
I'm saying the extension of rationality is to fix your own emotions. It's not to fix the car.
So the emotions
that's the part
are-
you can't fix.
Right.
That's the flat
emotions
tire.
are part of the car running. It's part of the mechanism of the car is the emotions.
Yeah. I think, and I hope you guys hear this as humble. I'm not trying to, this is my thought. I think that it's because of a misunderstanding of the rational method. I think a person suffers from, in the moment when they're suffering from those delusions, it's a result of not some brain state that's inevitable necessarily. It might be. But I think it has more to do with the lack of understanding of the rational method. I
Yeah,
think
it's not. I
I do think
completely,
that.
I completely disagree. I completely disagree because I've experienced it and been unable to rationally work my way out of it.
Me
And the
too.
thing is I've got severe depression. So for me, there's no amount of rationalization that I can do when I'm in these particular states. The only thing that I can do is implement strategies to prevent me from falling into a depressive state.
Exactly,
So that's
yeah.
as far as the rationality will take me. But once I'm in a depressive state, this is something that it's simple tasks that most people can just that take for granted. Getting out of bed to do something as simple as brushing your teeth are things that I find demonstrably impossible during these states.
So,
Yes.
Yes.
I know that it seems from somebody that has a stable mind, like what the hell's going on here?
Wait,
Like, why don't you just get out of bed?
Robbie. Wait, no, Robbie, though. That's, I think, the part that you're not steel manning. I hope you hear that I'm coming from this admittedly anecdotally, but don't assume that, trust me, man, I'm coming at this from a place of struggling. I'm not coming at this from a place
I know that you're going through that, but what I'm trying to say to you is that it's not something that you can rationalize out your way out of. Like if you are in these depressive states, right? This is something that I think is not a great thing to be speaking about. As if it is something you can do, because that's
that's where we disagree, Robbie. I think I can.
Let me. Well, that would make you different to.
Yeah, like,
but that
it's
would
not just us saying this, Logic. You have to understand it's not.
Let me just tell you, this would make you more stable than someone like myself if you can rationalize yourself out of these. What I'm saying to you is that people that deal with this is something that's understood in this field, that it is not something you can rationalize yourself out of. So if you have experienced it to the degree that I experience severe depression, you would know what I'm speaking about here. And this is the thing that why it's important to have these conversations so that you can understand.
I know exactly what you mean. I know what you mean, Robbie.
I do too.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean as well. Trust me. I know what it's like to not be able to rationalize myself out of depression. But this is again me speaking about myself. So I'm not talking about anyone else here. From my standpoint, anecdotally, go ahead.
And I'm letting you know that I understand where you're coming from. This is your experience, right? And that you can rationalize yourself out of these situations. I think the assumption that you're making here is that everybody else can, and that's not the case.
No, okay, let's drive that home then. No, the assumption I'm making is that I'm employing the method differently. The pattern I see is that there's a different method, and the people who understand the method of rationality as far as it goes to emotional stability seem to be on to something. Now, you can disagree with me on that. That's fine. But I actually, from my own anecdotal experience, have seen progress directly related to this.
Yeah, so Logic, you have to understand that, first of all, everybody's different. And also, there is no one version of things like depression. And there is but there is like consensus in people who study and treat and deal with these things. And the overwhelming consensus is that what you're saying is not true.
Well, the
Exactly.
overwhelming consensus doesn't employ my methodology.
I'm sure it does.
No, it doesn't.
It's unlikely that something you're thinking about with regard to mental health has not been thought about and studied.
Well, it's been thought about and studied, but it's not popularized. It's not used. That's why I'm trying to popularize it.
So communicate to me your method And I will, because I deal with professionals to help me through this, right? Because it's not like something that is like if you're saying the implementation of rationality and logic, which I happen to use on a day-to-day basis, and I know what these things are going to enable me to rationalize myself out of these situations. I would like to understand the logic and rationality that you are using, and whether or not I have tried to implement this into my life during these stages, when I've gone through these. I'm more curious to understand where you're coming from here, whether this is something that is within the academic field. From what I've dealt with the professionals, they understand this really well, and they're able to help me set up strategies in my life so that I'm more stable. When you're in a depressive episode, I want to hear about the steps. I want to hear about the steps that you are utilizing to pull yourself out.
When you're talking about those strategies, you and I are probably actually referencing very similar things. When you say that rather than rationalize, you set up these strategies, because in the moment of severe emotional dissonance, it's very hard to rationalize. So you set up these preemptive strategies. We're probably actually getting to the same thing, Robbie. You know?
No, but
because I'll tell. Okay. So if you're not satisfied with that, there's a different method. What I'm talking about specifically is this misunderstanding of employing, right, practically the method of rationality. There's two sides to it. You could divide it into inductive or deductive, but if you don't want to use that terminology, I just think your everyday application of rationality in your work is a different method, right, than employing rationality into your emotional life. There's two different methods. So when you say I use it every day in my everyday life, no, you don't.
Well, then we're asking you to describe it, though, Logic. So be more detailed.
Okay. Well,
can I just add to this, Logic? Is that what I'm saying? What I'm trying to say to you is that I seek out professional help. So I see a therapist, and I also take medication simultaneously to help me manage this. And what I'm saying to you is I am implementing, like I said, rational strategies to cope, to deal with it. But what I think you're not understanding is that when I fall into a depressive state, that's different to when I'm trying to deal with, to implement strategies in my life to prevent me from being in a depressive state, or while I'm in that depressive state, having strategies like I have on my wall, for example, an unalivement emergency help for me when I reach these phases, right? And these are serious things that, like, I've been pushed to the brink and done. How do I say? It's a real problem for me, and people don't understand this. And so, what I'm trying to say to you is that when I'm in these states, that I've had things that are nets that are set up to catch me or to try and help me. But the problem is that it's not as easy when you're in that state to use rationality. That's the thing that I think you're.
I fully understand. To reiterate your point, when you are in the moment, I said this earlier, and I experience it too. When I'm really emotionally distraught, there's no rationalizing to get myself out of it. And so if you set up these preemptive nets to catch yourself, well, you could close the distance, right, between when the emotions happen and when the tension is actually released versus just continuously going further and further down the hole. And so I do think that while you're in the emotional, again, it's a practice and a skill. There's a practice and a skill. So closing the gaps between the strategy you have in place, the net, the protective measures, and realizing it too late will close, right? The more the skill gets better, the more you're going to close the distance between those times. It won't be 5 days later that you realize, holy shit, I've been in a depressive episode and I can't get myself out of it. It's right away. You catch yourself, and not just realize it, because like you said, you might realize it and that doesn't matter. You're still going for a 6-7 day or month-long journey. Even if you think to yourself, oh, I'm really in a depressive episode, that doesn't matter. You're still going to go through it. And so I do actually think that there are methods to close this gap between the nets we set up, right? The insulation, the protective barriers, and our control of our emotions. And it does relate to rationality. This is where it gets fascinating. The methods you employ in your everyday work relate, but it's not the same method. It's the same.
Yes. So
yeah.
So what I'm hearing here is that now, like when we were talking about it, the nuances are coming out. And now that we're getting to the point of what we're trying to drive here, is that you are understanding now where we're coming from. What we're saying is that we use rational thought to minimize the risk of you actually following through with unalivement, for example, when it comes to this, depending on the severity of your depression. But what I'm saying to you is that once you're in that's a problem, right? There's no rationality that you can apply once you're in there. But
you
let me
can.
just finish it.
Okay, go ahead.
Let me just finish here. You think that you can, and maybe you can in your state, but this is the problem, right? You assuming that everybody else can, if this is what you're saying, or that there is a procedure that you can do when you're in that state, is not considered within the professional field as something that is possible as of yet. And nobody has proposed a method by which the professionals have employed to project. And if you are, then you would have to go through and communicate this to people that would take it seriously. But to me, I think like where you're not recognizing what I'm saying here is that the ability to even do the simple tasks, such as getting out of bed to do something, is completely is so far from you being able to even implement any rational or logical thinking during these states. And so if you can't even do simple tasks in your daily life, the effort to even apply logic or rational thinking is far from your capabilities if you have it as severe as I do.
I speak here. So I want to say two things. The very first one is we cannot control our emotions. When something happens, we don't have control over how we feel about it. We do have control and rationality after this experience happens. And when we apply the rationality afterwards as an afterthought, we think to ourselves, oh, fuck. In some cases, like, I shouldn't have done this. And then in other cases, you're like, well, maybe I can rationalize how this works out in a way. But either way, when something happens and we respond to it, that response usually is one of two things. It's a very emotional response, or you just wait. And if you wait, sometimes you can rationalize it, but that's not something that happens every single time. It's dependent upon the situation. It's dependent upon the environment you're in. It's dependent upon a lot of factors, like how you deal with your emotional reactions too. But at the same time, there are emotional reactions that we can't rationalize when we're in them, like how Robbie's describing when somebody is going through depression. It's very difficult to rationalize through that, to just get the fuck out of bed, or to just like take a shower or feed yourself or any of those things. Like, I know what that's like. I'm sure everybody's been through some degree of that. And for some people, it's harder to break that cycle. But what I do is I try to like change something, or try to find some something I can do outside of my normal routine. I go for a walk, or I go and reach out to a friend, try to hang out with them, or I start like recording music, or I start, writing a song.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't
Your
matter what it is.
suggestions are so potent. Your suggestions are so potent. Yes.
Right.
Logic,
Why
do
is
you
that
have-
change? Yeah.
Do you deal with OCD at all, for instance? Because this might be a better example.
Did you ask Robbie that or Tiny that?
No, I was asking you, Logic.
Sorry.
Do you deal with OCD at all?
No.
See, OCD might be a better example about how people are nowhere near capable of rationally talking themselves out of some emotional charge.
I think
that is a good example.
But I think the point is still being missed, that I'm using this term rational slightly differently methodologically than you guys are using it here.
I doubt it. In the case of OCD, it doesn't really matter how you use the word.
It does. No, it does. It does, definitely. It does. Because
So
I
if
can,
somebody's
because
if somebody's in an obsessive loop, if somebody's in an OCD
Just to
loop,
drill home the
there is
point, I'm not trying to
no.
make the claim you can rationalize yourself out of a obsessive loop or emotions necessarily. Not necessarily making that claim, but I'm saying there are methods to help with that.
Yeah, and I'm trying to tell
Well,
you
if you're
that.
saying that there's methods,
Yeah, go ahead, Robin.
sorry, go ahead, Darth. I was just going to say, if you're talking about like prevention methods to minimize the risk, we don't disagree with you here. But when you're saying where I'm getting confused, and which is not so clear during your communication, is that once you are in a state of depression, you are thinking that people can apply rationality, and that's the
Yes.
problem that I'm having. If that is what you are saying.
Yes, because I think that there's a different side to there is a way you can employ rationality, but you have to use it methodologically a little different than inductively, for instance, like in your
Yeah,
everyday
so
But
life.
even
let's
like a
say imagine
deductive,
let's create a scenario.
logical.
Let's say, Logic, that you're in an OCD loop. What method would you use to remove yourself from that loop?
Well, as like you said, like I kind of already conceded earlier, you may not be able to. So I wouldn't claim that you necessarily are. Someone with severe OCD could just pull themselves out of that loop using this method. It's not a miracle like that. It's a practice. So slowly over time, I could get them to, yes, expose them their right, whether it's paranoia or a phobia of, right, like it depends on the OCD and what it's related to, right? But yeah, over long periods of time using this methodology, yes, I do think you could alleviate the symptoms of it.
Yeah, that's just a basic OCD gets worse over time, not better,
Well,
unless
depending on
it's
the well,
unless it's
depending on the
treated with
methodology.
things like pharmaceuticals.
Yeah,
And just a
totally. In certain
question,
cases, yes. In certain cases, totally.
and just a question, Logic. Like, what kind of deductive argument, if this is what you are referring to, that I can tell my brain, and you think that I would be able to act on any thought that I have with regards to this during a state of depression, like lay it out to me, because
Okay.
then I would be able to assess whether it will, if I know that it would work if I've done it before,
Sure.
or so yeah, go ahead.
Okay. As I was going through school, I really struggled with the truth. I was on the search for the truth. I loved the truth. I loved learning, right? And I knew that being an honest student and an honest search for education made me want to learn the truth. But this made me somewhat. Go ahead.
Could I just like I'm asking for an argument, like with premises
I'm getting there.
and a conclusion.
I don't
Right.
have like a syllogism for you, but I'm getting there. I'll make it as quick as I can. You can see how the truth is related, though, to deductive arguments, right?
Well. So for me, it's not clear when you're talking about something in the past rather than laying out like an argument. It's a bit hard for me to see what you're talking
Give me like
about.
2 minutes. Give me like 2 minutes to lay it out. I hope that's not too much time. I know I have the tendency to ramble, so feel free to cut me off at any time, okay?
Right.
Okay. I got really depressed coming out of school because I wanted to know the truth and I couldn't reconcile that search logically or scientifically. There didn't seem to be any truth value that I could just attach my belief to and reconcile my neuroticism. My personal mental health relied on my education to be resolved. I wanted to learn the truth. And then when I hit rock bottom and understood that a lot of the method of science and education has nothing to do with getting to the truth, it has to do with embracing uncertainty, that alleviated a lot of my, original neuroticism, right? So my mental health is directly tied to my education. Once I could see that deduction, right, that deduction has nothing to do with getting to the truth or a conclusion, that it is actually a method for alleviating your own confirmation bias. It worked.
Let me just
It worked
yeah,
to
let me
stabilize my
interrupt a little bit,
emotions.
Logic. Let me interrupt a little bit. So the thing that you're describing right now is some sort of like intellectual journey. And you keep mentioning your neuroticism, but you have not described that to us. So all we're hearing so far about is an intellectual journey.
What do you mean? Okay, what do you mean? I'm confused now.
What
You
is the
mean,
neuroticism that you're talking about?
severe depression. I mean, like a severe neurotic tendency to disagree with everyone in my life, separate myself and isolate myself from every responsibility and relationship due to a severe thirst for understanding. My own, it was a self-fulfilling prophecy effect in the
Yeah,
sense that my,
that
go
doesn't
ahead.
sound like depression. I've never heard of that. What
Yeah.
you're describing as being described as depression.
You've mentioned thoughts, behaviors, and consequences there, but still not the emotion of depression.
Yeah, what you just
What do you
described does
mean?
not sound like depression to me.
I don't get it. You guys are diagnosing me now?
No. We're trying to. You're mentioning depression as the neuroticism, as the thing that you're trying, that is on the table as like the thing that theoretically rational thinking can get you out of, but we're not hearing any attributes of your state of mind that are related to depression.
Wait, neuroticism or depression?
Well, you claimed that I asked you about what did you mean by your neuroticism, and your description was my neuroticism was depression.
No, well, yeah, my neuroticism in a lot of ways led to some depressive, like what? Okay, so what are you? I'm confused here. Am I trying to? What am I trying to show here? That I am depressed? I don't get
That
it.
you had some you were telling this whole story to give
Yeah,
us a practical anecdotal example
of deduction. That's right.
rationality as it relates to some kind of mental health issue.
That's right. That's right.
And so
So,
we're
and I
asking
said,
you, what's the mental health issue?
well, you don't think that my neuroticism and you know, examples of isolating myself and going through you know,
That's a
emotional
behavior.
instability.
No, this
Well,
all sounded like
you want
so
to
far
hear
it all
about
sounded like just some like
so
rational
you want to
behavior.
hear about my
No,
emotions. You want to
no,
hear about
just
my emotions?
just your steps of the method that you're
Well, that's
claiming.
deep. Well, that has nothing to do with the
So can I
neuroticism. Okay, go ahead.
can I say logical, Charles? So, for example, when I'm in a state of depression, I gave an example of where I can't even do a simple task or rationalize anything in my mind. For me, any task like this is so far from me being capable of executing any thought during these states. And in fact, the emotional turmoil that I'm dealing with drives me to the point of contemplating whether I want to stay in this world or not. And so
Yeah.
when it comes to this, what I'm asking you, when you're in this state of mind, what is it that you apply to rationalize and execute steps that pull you out of such a state so easily that you think the rest of the world should embrace, and that you can provide the solution for people that suffer from severe depression?
The reason I had to go back through the story, I'm realizing now, is because it had to be a fundamental foundational switch in my method of thinking. My depressive episodes, my emotional distraughtness, my outbursts, my isolation, my lack of motivation, you know, and also contemplating suicide were all or smooshbenide, sorry, TikTok, was all just a part of my method, my methodological approach to knowledge and thinking and truth. For me, it had to be changed foundationally. I had to unlearn a lot of my assumptions to basically re-empower how my education was going to be applied so it didn't hurt me. My education was hurting me. My
I mean, this might be a
neuroticism,
weird interpretation, but what you're describing sounds kind of like what a lot of like theists say when they say, as an atheist, how do you even, not just off yourself because you have no purpose? It sounds like you almost sort of were rationally talking yourself into something like schmuicide and depression, as opposed to actually experiencing those things foundationally without talking
whoa,
yourself into them.
I don't see the difference there, but perhaps.
Yeah, one is biochemical, the other is like intellectual.
I'd say these things are related.
Well, except you wouldn't have experienced the depression without your logical process of getting there.
what is Logic Troll? What is your definition of neuroticism?
I don't really know. I guess like a form of paranoia and thinking about overthinking, and micromanaging fine details that are unrelated to like your, life, sort of. It's a loose definition, but do you have a stronger definition?
Well, it's a personality trait. Okay. So that's just the best category to put it in. It's associated with negative feelings, but it's not the negative feelings themselves. So we were just confused when you said your neuroticism is depression.
Yeah, and I would also just say that I think I agree with you that I can try and implement strategies into my life that help reduce the risks of me falling into a depressive state. What I'm trying to communicate to you here is that when I am in a depressive state, all of the rationality and logic that I've learned throughout my life is not helpful at all. And if someone thinks that it is, I think they are misinformed about what depression is and the experiences that other people have during these states.
Yeah, it could be. I don't concede that I'm misinformed. Perhaps I am, but I don't concede that I'm misinformed. I've learned about these topics. I think that we are utilizing the term rational different.
So can you just can you name the steps of this effective process that helps people out of their depressive state?
Yeah, I think that's why you were giving us your anecdotal experience, right? Is to get us to the steps.
Oh, you're asking genuinely about deduction, like about how I see deduction working?
No,
to do this?
Well, just the steps involved in whatever method you're promoting.
Well, it's foundational. So there's not like a step 1, step 2. It's a practice. So you're either doing it or you're not doing it. And you can close the gaps through the practice, you're going to be able to close the gaps between those.
So then describe the
steps.
practice. Describe the practice.
The practice.
So I think
go ahead.
I think we're talking about two different things here. If this is what you're trying to say, it's foundational. This is the thing that I'm trying to say to you, that outside of depressive states, when I am stable, I am implementing strategies to minimize the risks. The problem is it's not just like me, a mental thought in my brain. It is the structure and the build of my brain that causes, like when people were saying biochemical, right? That it's this that dictates the neurodivergency of my brain, right? So these are two different factors in comparison to somebody that's just like experiencing negative thoughts or experiencing like grief. And so this is a thing that I think when you're speaking on this topic, we're talking about two separate things here. I understand that like within my worldview and the education I've had, it minimizes the chances of me I guess like I can implement strategies to help minimize that risk, but people who haven't been educated or do not apply rational thought, they wouldn't deal with such mental health issues as well as they could, right?
Great.
And so I agree with you here,
yes.
but what I'm talking about is the depressive state that you find yourself in, and you're saying that you have steps by which you can pull yourself out of, no matter what your worldview is or like what rationality you have in your life. What I'm trying to communicate to you is that there is none of that can help you when you're in a depressive state. And actually Duff said this really well. It's just you're just sitting there waiting for it to end, and you can just tell yourself it will end at some point, and you hope. Well, I don't know. I don't want to get into the details.
Actions you can take. There are definitely actions you can take, both mentally, using this method. Well,
give us the substance, buddy.
Well, from my standpoint, the depressive thoughts come in the form of thoughts, right? Propositions. If I had a blank mind, if I was truly just sitting blankly, I would say that's more like paralysis analysis. I'm just apathetic on that's a little different than having a spiraling loop of depressive thoughts. So do you guys agree that there's a difference there?
I completely disagree with you that there is some sort of like thought process in depression.
Well, that what do you mean? Like okay, I get what you mean, but it is directly correlated to thought process.
Your thoughts may be affected by your
No,
depression,
the other
and
way
your
around. The
depression
other
might
way
be
around.
affected by your thoughts,
Yes.
but like they are not. Neither is like in a depressive state. You are not required to have thoughts, and you will still be in a depressive state.
Yeah, that's what I said. You could be like completely apathetic or just
No. Apathetic is. I mean, a depressive state is not dependent on thoughts.
no, you're right, but it's characterized by them.
No.
Yeah. The types of thoughts you're having are what's going to characterize your depression.
I mean, if you mean by characterized, like
What else
if
would we
someone's
characterize it by?
going to
What else
like
would we
try
characterize
to
it by?
analyze what is it characterized by?
Well, because if you had two people laying in a
Okay,
bed for 7 days,
let me answer your question.
okay.
From my if I were to characterize what the kind of depressive states I am talking about, they're characterized by a emotional state.
Okay, so the thoughts, I'm trying to say that
Zero thoughts, emotional state.
you then so the method has to do with relating these two things. So the further we get from being able to relate our emotions from our thoughts, the further we are from these strategies that we put in place to prevent us from getting to that point. Once we're to the point where our emotions are completely separated from our thoughts, that is the very irrational state we are trying to prevent, right? We're trying to unify our emotions and our thoughts. That's the whole thing we're attempting to do. And so the approach, the method is one of doing that, right? Practicing and trying to do that.
Do you think that you won't be hungry if you don't think about being hungry?
I mean, to the very extent of things, yes. If you really empowered the method appropriately, yes.
Yeah, I completely disagree.
No, you could definitely overcome your bodily urges and starve
That's not
yourself.
what I asked you. That's not what I asked.
That you
I
wouldn't
asked.
be hungry?
Yeah, you think that like if you didn't think about being, in other words, hunger is dependent on thoughts is your claim.
I mean, if you aren't thinking about being hungry, your body can still be hungry. But you can
Exactly.
yes, but averting your thought is the method we're trying to do here. We are
Well,
trying to,
maybe we
we're
should
trying
look
to
at
avert
it.
the thought.
And let
Maybe
me
we
give you
should.
wait, Brad. Let me give. I had something I had thought about a little while ago. Let me just mention this.
Yep.
As sort of like an extreme analogy, I feel like you're saying you should be able to rationalize your way out of a seizure, and you should be able to rationalize your
No.
way out of a coma.
No.
These are the kinds of things that you're leaning into from our
No.
perspective.
No. To make it clear, I'm making a mere nuanced symmetry breaker between the use of logic in inductive, technical, scientific usages, and then deductive, everyday, practical life usage like emotional stability. How far these can actually get into actual biological mental health disorders, I have no idea, right? But I think that they do overlap. These things do overlap, and anecdotally, like I said before, in my experience, they've worked and they continue to work. But I'm not perfect at it, and it's a practice.
Okay, I have a couple questions.
So can I?
Okay, so first question is, do you have chronic depression, Logic Troll?
I've never been diagnosed. No.
Do you experience depression in either episodic or chronically? Like, do you have
In the last 5 years, no, since I've adopted this method, but between the ages of 8, I would say even 15 to about 25.
right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
my second question is, can you name the causes of depression, like episodic?
A lot of them were unrelated to a cause. A lot of them would have just happened randomly. A lot of them.
No. I'm talking episodic depression. Is there something in somebody's life where they have an episode where it's not chronic? What would be the, things that would trigger that depression?
Just to clarify, Logic, he's not asking you about yours. He's asking you about your knowledge of the subject.
I'm confused. I'm confused now.
Yeah.
Sorry. I was about to answer for myself.
So I mean,
no. The first one was about yourself. The second one is about knowledge of the subject.
Yeah. So you're saying that you have this method that can draw people out of depression. I'm just wondering if you know what the causes are of depression, like episodic causes.
No.
Okay. Do you see where that might be a problem?
Perhaps. What are the episodic causes of depression?
No. I'm not going to give you the answer. I'm just going to let it sit there that you don't know them.
Okay. I can look it up later.
Robbie, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of bring up, like, when I go to therapy, like, one of the things that came up is, like, dealing with the triangle where you have, like, emotion, behavior, and thought, and how these, like, the strategies we implement, or that I've been taught to try and implement, that things such as behavior and thought are things that I can somewhat control. And this is the focus of trying to deal with depression, right? It's when it gets to the part of the triangle where you have emotion, this part is really, really difficult to manage with people that have depression. So I think, like, what I'm trying to say to you is when I do spiral down into like a depressive episode, what the rational thought and the strategies we implement are based on the other two, which is behavior and thought, and trying to manage these things to prevent me from falling into a depressive state. My worldview, my job, the rationality and logic that I hold to have nothing to do with me coping and dealing with my depression. This is what I'm trying to communicate to you, Charles. And what I'm trying to point out here is when I'm in a depressive episode, the aspect of emotion is a big part of it, right? And I what I'm trying to get out of you is, how is it that you think someone is capable of applying rational thought during such an experience that, for me, I find somewhat baffling, that you are suggesting you have the answer and solution to depression regarding this particular point. And that's the point that I'm...
Okay, I wouldn't say I have the answer to depression. I would say humbly, man, I would say that you and I have a different understanding of what logic and rationality is. When you say rationality cannot be utilized to help, it's because you're using it the way you're using it. I don't agree with you that we are using these terms the same way. Everything else you said, I agree with. So it's just a terminology thing.
The thing is like, when I'm using rationality and logic and all of these, I'm using it in the sense that everybody would use these words, right? When we're talking about like what logic is and we're talking about rationality, I think these are general terms that most people understand.
I don't.
Right.
Hence my name. I do not think that these are popularized terms. I think most people, especially academically minded people, get this wrong, especially how it pertains to their emotional stability and neuroticism. Just saying. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm saying all these things. That's what I personally believe.
Well, can you define what you mean by kind of using logic and reason, and also, if you don't mind, what you mean by deductive and inductive?
Yeah,
that'd be a good place.
Like Robbie said, like what in his job or like in any academic sense, I think for the most part, in the lab or any kind of like observational setting, we're using inductive logic. So academically, most people I think get educated on induction and how to provide steps to get to a conclusion, or at least limit our tools for observation. Whereas I don't think applying deduction, which is specifically, in my opinion, specifically for emotional stability, is not really been popularized. I think that deduction is a lot different in its application to the mind than inductive reasoning. I think inductive reasoning can be harmful to the mind if people are educated into inductive reasoning without really foundationalizing deduction.
So if you're talking about induction and deduction and academia, these are both aspects that are taught within the scientific field. It's not just, people have this misconception that science is just induction. And this is where I think you are misled by having this thought here.
Well, to the degree that it applies emotionally, right? If deduction seems so tautological in the academic setting, it seems like it has no, it's self-referential, it has no real utilization. It's actually the foundation of our emotional stability. That's my belief. It's this misunderstanding that irks me. I think deduction, the method of deduction, isn't one of an academic setting or armchair reasoning. It's of practical application in your everyday life to your emotions, not to your observations. Okay. It's something to observe your observations. This is quite of a conundrum, right?
So, and I completely get that. The act of, I mean, some things defy definition, and even those that don't, the act of defining them is really difficult. But what I've kind of taken from, I asked if you could define induction, define deduction, and define or outline what you mean when you say you apply logic or reason. And in regard to induction, you gave mostly examples. You gave maybe a possible kind of definitional outline, which was like steps to get to a conclusion, but that's just going to be inference, right? Not induction. That's going to be like deductive or inductive inference. Because
the main difference definitionally for this conversation would be the tentativeness of induction. Inductive conclusions are always tentative, right? And so, again, related back to my mental health, realizing that helped a lot. Oh, all inductive conclusions are tentative. That helped me relax my mind, fully digesting that idea. Then questioning, okay, so then how does deduction work? Because deduction is the next tempting step, since, all the deductive conclusions are certain, right? As long as the premises are true, we can get to a conclusion, a deductive conclusion. And so that is... So that conditional of relying on the premises, again, relaxed my digesting that idea fully, relaxed my psychology, because I saw that the conditional aspects of deduction are also tentative. And so the etiquette, it then made me focus my energy and my mind rather than on neurotic thoughts into what is true. It made me focus my mind on things like humility, comedy, empathy, steel-manning my opposition. And the less I focused on those things, the more I ran into inductive, turmoil, toxic, circular reasoning. The more I alleviated myself through deduction by questioning myself humorously, putting my premises forward falsifiably, and allowed myself to really parameterize and do internal critiques on my opposition. The moment my psychology started to heal, right? I could relax a lot of my premature assumptions, and I could get to the bottom of what was making me anxious, whether it be, right, a thought about a job interview or how badly my breakup is going to be, or et cetera, right? A lot of things can run us into mental turmoil. They can end up just as behaviors, or they could just be biological dispositions. But I think to the degree that these methods work, it's not simply for academic settings. It also does help with your mental state, and it can help to close that gap between preventative measures and emotional dissonance.
Okay. So, just to make sure I've got you right, there's like ambiguity whenever we make inductive inferences. There's going to be some ambiguity because, I mean, it depends on how you split reasoning. You could say there's more than two types of reasoning. I typically don't, but there is probably a difference between inference to the best explanation, right, and enumerative induction. So inference to the best explanation will be what best explains fact F, and that's going to be some kind of theory, right? Whereas enumerative induction is going to be like experiments where all observed Fs in the past have been Gs. The next F is likely or not likely to be a G, or so many Fs in the past have been Gs, so therefore it is likely that the next F will be a G with this much probability, right? So there's two types of induction there, and they do give existential dread, right? Because it is, like you said, tentative. It's only true on the basis of the principles we assume, like uniformity, right? So that's Hume's problem of induction, which would apply to both inference to the best explanation and enumerative induction, right? So both our theoretical and our experimental inductions are in jeopardy there because they are tentative. Deduction, on the other hand, when you can phrase things in a way in which, so like you mentioned Popper earlier, and I really, Popper is like my enemy, but I understand now maybe why you mentioned, because Popper looks for a deductive way to do science, right? Popper relies on falsification, which is basically just running modus tollens. So we've got two very big figures. We've got Hempel and Popper. Hempel has the covering law explanation of scientific explanation, and Popper has the falsificationalism view of scientific explanation, which is a deductive model. The issue there is, sure, you can get security, but like you said, the soundness of, not the validity, but the soundness of any deductive inference we make is also kind of subject to induction, right? They are also tentative. So even though I can see how deduction might give us some security, I think a lot of our emotional stability questions are in fact still inductive. I think, even if we get to know ourselves such that we could plug in, in X circumstance, if I feel this, then I will act that, and we can know that deductively. Maybe that circumstance is not the exact same circumstance as one that's, slightly different, and maybe slightly differently we've not experienced a slightly different experience yet, and so it would be it would be enumerative induction to say, just because I've acted the same in situation XYZ doesn't mean I'm going to act the same in situation A, which is slightly different from XYZ. So yeah, I can see why trying to focus deductively can maybe give some kind of security, but I would just say that the same can be offered on the other, and both rely on each other, probably.
Yes, I love.
Sorry, can I
Go
just
ahead.
jump in
Please
here,
do. Please
logical troll? So when we're talking about like these, like deduction and induction, this is not my issue here. What my issue is here is that when I'm talking about my experience of being in a depressive episode, and you saying that it's possible for us to rationalize our way out of it, this is where I'm having a problem with the statements that you're saying here, because these are things that I need to manage, right? And I'm trying to minimize the risks of applying these strategies in my life so that I don't fall into a depressive episode. And what I'm trying to present to you is, like, you are telling me that you can reason your way out of a depressive episode easily, and this is this is what I'm trying to ask you,
Robbie,
and trying
that's
to
not
get.
that's not entirely
No, no,
what
no,
I
no.
said.
This is why I presented to you, and we've been asking you for the steps for so long now, and we haven't received any steps by which, when someone is experiencing a depressive episode, how they can rationalize their way out of this and apply logic and reason. What I'm saying to you is, I understand that you can implement strategies to minimize the risk of you falling into a depressive episode. I don't disagree with this whatsoever. What I disagree with you, and I'm trying to get out of you, and I've tried to nuance this as much as possible, is what are the steps and strategies that you can communicate to me, that I can also communicate to other people that are professionals in the field that disagree with what you are saying. And so this is what we are asking you.
Well, you're asking a lot, and I never said, this. I'm flattered. I'm actually flattered that you would ask that much of me, man. That you're taking this conversation that seriously. I also hope, man, that this isn't meant to be. I want to reiterate a little bit. This isn't meant to be a personal discussion, Robbie. I wasn't ever trying to have
I understand that, dude. The thing
Okay.
is what you were
Okay.
saying before, and I could even probably ask the rest of the panel. This is what I've been trying to communicate to you the whole time, and tried to nuance out of you trying to communicate this to me, right? And I think everybody else on the panel would agree that they observed this throughout our discussion in the past. And I've stated this multiple times throughout our discussion. And you were saying that that you had the steps, and this is why we were trying to at least have that discussion. I think for me, the problem that I'm finding with it is it's dismissive of the experience that others have with mental health. The approach that you're saying here is that, and that's the part that is, at least for me, somewhat troubling.
It's equally dismissive in the opposite direction, Robbie.
So Logic Troll, what's the claim or what's the argument? Which argument are you making?
Well, I could go over a lot, but I think it'd probably be the way I would like to start is just like differentiating this earlier thought about what Darth said about, there can be depressive states that don't have thoughts or exactly, I can't remember exactly how you worded it, but so in those cases, I have no method, right? If there is such a state where your emotions have no thoughts tied to them, and you're again, when I'm saying I am not talking about you, Robbie. This is just colloquial. I'm talking about. I hope you hear that. I'm talking to myself.
What you've stated now, and now you are talking to me. You are addressing the issue that you, and this is what we were trying to get out of you. Whereas before, you weren't really talking to us with regards to what we were trying to say. Now that you've said what you've said, then I agree with you, and this is what I was trying to get out of you, is that because we were trying to communicate to you that it's not possible, like at least for the experiences and the severity of my depression, to use rationalization during a depressive episode to pull myself out. And so, what I'm trying to say to you is that I can use that to prevent myself from falling into a depressive episode and have stability within my life. But that's different to when I'm in a depressive episode, and this is what I was trying to get out of you, and you seem to have at least communicated effectively to me now.
In those moments, I'm grasping at, if I'm having a moment of complete dissonance from my emotions, I'm still grasping at my thoughts. I'm trying to utilize and leverage the few thoughts I do have, even if they seem irrational or out of place. And I'm trying to utilize deduction on those thoughts. So even if the thought is as severe as questioning the value of my own life, I think that what I'm doing in those moments, and I don't want to strawman steal or Mitch's point, because I did hear his differentiation between the different inductive methods, but for the most part, the pattern I see is that those are inductive rationality taking a hold of your mind and basically running me into a depressive thought. If I have a looping thought pattern, that's when deduction can work to help reorient my thought process and get me back on track. It's not as easy, though. This is the thing that's also hard, right? It is somewhat like miraculous. It's not as easy. This is the part where it's like, I think that I'm being a little bit you're not fully sympathizing with my position, because like it takes years and lots of practice, and I still fail at this. So I'm not trying to say that it's just easy to pull yourself out of a severely manic episode, right? It's not. But these strategies that you're talking about, that you're referencing, and I think also through the deductive method, that can close the gaps. Though now using deduction, I tend to notice quicker when my thought loops, when I'm clinging to thoughts that are harmful thoughts. I notice them quicker.
This is why I laid it out to you clearly before, right? So that we were speaking about the same thing. Because what I'm saying to you is that I understand what you are saying here, and I agree with you that happens. What I was specifically pointing out to you when you were referring to that people can rationalize their way out, what I'm saying is that people can use rationality and logic, any kind of way of thinking to prevent and minimize it. To say that it is, I don't like using this word, but it's a mental disease that people have that isn't as simple as being able to utilize logic and rationalization. It is something that is it's a thing that people have to learn to manage throughout their lives. And this is where I've been trying to say to you, I agree that, having an education using these rational procedures of thought to manage it are extremely helpful. But it doesn't fix the problem of depression one has. It's something that needs, and this is what all I've been trying to communicate to you.
Yeah, to that extent, Robbie, we can agree. We don't have to go into it further if you don't want. I suppose I'm a little bit more optimistic. Perhaps we could conclude on that. I'm a little more optimistic on how much these methods really can improve. I know there's a limit. I'm not trying to draw it all the way across, and I'm not trying to not sympathize with you. I'm trying to avoid the personal discussion entirely, but I get the urge to criticize my claims to have some sort of method. But again, I'm sharing this humbly and anecdotally through my experience, to help people. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, especially because it does help. I do have faith that at the end of the day, even I think I'm maybe a little too optimistic here, but I do think that even down to biodiversity or chemistry in the brain, there can still be methods to rational methods to perhaps perturb.
I would say maybe logic
dissonance.
that the way that it could be detrimental is if by saying the things that you're saying, you were to lead someone down a path that would move them away from something that could help to something that would end up, that's very speculative, that may not help. Probably, well, from my point of view, probably won't help.
Well, this is kind of gets weird for me because the whole deductive method's at the foundation of scientific reasoning. So you can't prescribe a drug or a therapy without first assessing the rationality of the person. And when half the population doesn't understand the method of deductive reasoning, it's pretty premature to start, applying surgical intervention. I think a lot could be done through education. That's what I'm advocating here for.
But this is why I thought the distinction was important, because I don't know if you mean the same thing as everybody else when you say deductive reasoning.
I don't think I do.
Yeah. So that's maybe some part of the difficulty. If anything, so you worry about circularity should apply to deductive reasoning rather than inductive reasoning, if any. It could apply to both, but deductive reasoning is
maybe
really
this will
circular,
clarify.
right?
Maybe this will clarify things. If I had a bunch of data that was absolutely random, the only way I can interpret it is through deduction, and that's life. You're interpreting randomness in data. The only way to really make it intelligible for your emotional stability is through the deductive method. There's no other way to interpret randomness in data.
So randomness is a lack of interpretability, right? So
yeah.
So So I
Do
don't.
you see
I
how
don't
that's
think you
synonymous
do.
with like depressive thoughts?
No, not really. I mean, I still suffer to this day with depression. You know, I take sertraline. Took my sertraline a bit late today. It's for me. It's not randomness. You know, there are many factors and some still unknown to me as to why I get into depressive episodes. It's likely because of the conflict between my ADHD and my pursuits. Like I want to do a fuck ton of shit, right? So I want to do lots of stuff, but ADHD kind of prevents me from doing everything I want to do. So I only get to do a fraction of that stuff, and that's quite depressing, right? And it's
That's
not
totally how I am. I totally resonate with that. Like I'll start
right,
like 12 different things and finish like maybe 2 or 3,
right.
if that.
And over time, don't get me wrong. Like if you look back, Tiny, you seem like like you've covered lots of stuff, and you do like over time realize that starting multiple projects after enough time, if you've kind of remembered the stuff that you've done, you get a big map of stuff, right? You get quite a diverse range of knowledge, but it is depressing to start a project and like you just you have no idea whether you're going to finish it, and if it's of any importance, it's even harder for me, right? Like my PhD is almost like sometimes it becomes the one thing I can't do. I can learn about any new philosophy that comes my way, but so depression. Basically, my point is depression. It's multiply realizable. Many things cause it. There's not going to be a one solution fits all. And when the solution being prescribed is deduction, quote unquote, where deduction is not a familiar concept, like your version of deduction isn't a familiar concept, I feel like this is probably not as productive as you want it to be. I think if you explicate on if you explain the what you mean exactly, that could help. And I think for a little bit of clarification, you and Robbie actually were at a similar position where you might say something like there are cognitive or behavioral tactics like CBT or stoicism or whatever that you can import as a system, maybe like a system where you crank out things a little more deductively. It's a little less guesswork, and then you either see if it works or doesn't deductively, and then you rule out what doesn't, keep what does. Maybe a method like that where you're adopting personal strategies. But I think you have to give more explanation, maybe.
Yeah, I think you're right there, Mitch. And this is a thing that I recognized earlier on in the conversation, that we agreed on many things. It was just when it was getting to the nuance, when we were giving specific examples and asking like about these and that could have been like when, at least from the way we saw, is that we were specifically talking about depressive episodes, not strategies that we're implementing to try and prevent some kind of episode. And so it was either a misunderstanding from what we were trying to communicate to you, Logic Troll, or but from what I saw,
no, it's very nuanced, dude. This conversation is very nuanced, bro.
Yeah. But yeah, I think like at least after like the last couple of sentences you said, that kind of at least within me reconciled what you were referring to, because I was trying to make a distinction between these two types of situations, because one of the things that I'm talking about when I was explaining to you what I experienced through depression, and explaining that to you so that you could give us the steps in order to pull yourself out. Like there are things that my therapist suggests that I try, and that takes a lot of effort, and it takes to even try these things, and so. That's the thing. It's like what I was trying to say to you is that during those states, there is no room for me to be rational. I mean, I try to do things, and that's what I was trying to communicate to you. And I wanted to make a distinction between the strategies we implement and experiencing depression.
Yeah, I hear that distinction, and I think the thing I'm trying to drill home is closing that gap. I think deductive method closes that gap to where the strategies basically become, you can, if you practice enough, I think, basically implement them instantly. Like I have an example here that I'd like to ask you about. For instance, I know this is a bad example because it's circumstantial. It's not episodic depression. Like if a close loved one passes, it's expected that you will go through a grieving process, and you're not trying to put that on the same level as this episodic depression that you're talking about. At the same time, the person suffering from the expected law, or the expected emotions from the loss, the grieving process, still has to deal with, right? They still have to have a method for overcoming that inevitability, and that's where I think deduction works, right? So it's less for the state. It's definitely less for the state of a person who has no thought or looming circular thoughts that they're dealing with. It's more of a a raw emotional. They're so dissonant from their emotions that they can't even grasp a thought related to them. At that point, I don't think these methods would help.
Yeah, I agree with you, and this is why I get professional help to deal with my mental health, because what they're trying to do is set up like strategies in such a way that I can be as stable as long as possible, right? Because there are certain things I can manage about myself. So when you look at the CBT charts and the triangles, there are certain aspects of these that are much easier to manage, like behavior and thought, as opposed to when you are in an emotional state.
Hey, Flavi, did your therapist ever tell you not to talk with your mouth full?
I'm sorry.
Hey Robbie, you talk with your mouth full. You enjoy your food and your conversation at the same time.
Thank you, Mitch. See, Mitch is my boy.
I also do think that there's this important thing I'm trying to drill home, which is the difference between how we educate on inductive reasoning versus deductive reasoning. The embracement of failure. I think it is therapeutic for one to have a method of embracing failure. Of a lot of the neuroticism or negative self-taught or lack of confidence comes from this non-embracing a method of failure, right? Not being confident in your failures, looking for failures, in fact. And so to that degree, deduction really helps mentally. Like, I'm no longer searching in a conversation necessarily to prove myself right. I'm searching for the places that I am wrong. And that's very therapeutic to do that in an honest and like curious way. Deductive demands this state of humility that if you're properly practicing it, there cannot be another state than emotional stability. So referencing it really helps because it demands emotional stability for the method to even work, to get it off the ground. So for me as an academic somewhat, right, it helps me to, maybe not for everyone, but for me, it helps me to reorient myself to think in that way, to get back to the deductive method is a strategy to get myself out of the emotional dissonance. It doesn't happen right away, right? Often it takes a while, or sometimes it doesn't happen at all, depending on, like I said, if a loved one passed, you're going to grieve. There's no way to really, like you guys are saying, trying to rationalize your way out of it. And that's, I think, where deduction is going to be the absolute necessity, right, for me to escape self-loathing and grieve properly.
Okay,
Like,
could you sorry to interrupt, so let's say X person is grieving, what do they do with deduction? How do they,
right, inductively you have, well, I would say similar to randomness. As far as your thoughts go, there's a randomness happening. You're having this non-tangential thought process, either a loop or just scattered thoughts, right? And so this disorganization of randomness, inductive, like going out into your day and observing what's going on, is not going to help you. It's going to get you further into this loop, thinking about how much did my loved one suffer? I should have been there more. I should have saw them. I didn't get to say goodbye to them. All these questions pop up while you're grieving. So the appropriate method, right, to try and grieve gracefully is to indulge in deductive reasoning, which often comes like metaphorical substrates, like going and getting flowers, literally taking acts of bias, taking acts of superstition. Indulge in your bias. Indulge in your bias. See, schools teaches you not to do that. They say bias confirmation is the detriment to knowledge, and that's what you're trying to, it's the absolute thing that you do not want to cling to. But in these circumstances, that's what you need to cling to. You need to cling to the metaphorical substrate that holds you together, right? Believing in those little acts of kindness, like, why get out of bed and do the dishes? What's the point? You have to believe in something greater than the dishes. You have to indulge in this deductive method of like, hey, maybe the dishes aren't just the dishes. Maybe there's something more there. Maybe there's something I'm missing. Question yourself. Get back to that curious, childlike curiosity in yourself, right? To illuminate, rather than the sort of, I don't know, the begrudging, longevity of inductive inferences all the time. Just having to observe reality all the time and how harsh it is. Like, indulge a little bit in the comedy, for instance. Comedy is often through something like pun or abstract thinking, right? And that again is this deductive reasoning. Like, being able to see the comedy often does relate to deduction, being able to break it down semantically.
See, this is but I recognize the process explanation. Yeah, exactly, Peak. So this is where I think you're running into the most issues is with these terms, deduction and induction. You don't have to follow this advice at all, but I would really advise dropping those from your, like, really learning how to explain what you mean by these ideas, and just don't rely on the terms at all, because they simply they are not offensively, these are proprietary uses of those terms, right?
Somewhat.
So if I was grieving, right, and I had, let's say I wanted an inductive process of reasoning to get me through this grieving, what I might say to myself is, I've experienced loss before, and even though it felt insurmountable, I got through it. I've done this multiple times before, therefore it's likely that I'm going to do this again, right? That's inductive reasoning, and there doesn't seem to be anything harmful about that, right? Which was one of the claims you made earlier about inductive reasoning over deductive, is that there's like these harmful loops, but
yes, I do see that as harmful. I do see that assumption as harmful.
Okay, but
because deduction has to do with this obsession, right? Ridding this obsession of intelligibility. If the data is random, then I'm going to capitalize on the randomness. I'm going to stop interpreting the data and actually just capitalize on the limits. Like, putting limits on things is the very problem that most people. It's not that I'm using deduction proprietarily. It's that most people don't understand the term.
Well, that seems to be a misunderstanding of how language works, right? Most people can't misunderstand a term because a term is defined by how most people use it. So it is, like, by definition, right? By some definition, impossible for most people to be wrong about a term. They might be wrong about a usage of a term in a particular instance. So if we have, like, a specialist term in science, and everybody kind of, like, theory, right? Many people conflate and equivocate, and that's possible, where you equivocate on a natural use term with basically a term in a specialist field, right?
Okay, it's not, so it's the fact, right? Remember here that it's a method. So the fact that people could articulate the method means nothing about their ability to use it. So many
for sure,
could,
but your ability to communicate the method is gonna fail or succeed based on in information theory you've got the You've got the encoder, right? The person who sends the message, and you've got the decoder, and it's demonstrable that encoding a message is not the same thing as decoding a message. And so I can send a message, I can write you a text, and I can put a bunch of emojis, and you could read that and be like, oh, wow, you've offended me so badly. And all I meant is something completely harmless and innocuous. We can misinterpret messages. And so when you're using terms like deductive, which, so if you were to open any philosophy of science textbook, it's going to start, it's probably its second or third chapter is going to be scientific reasoning, right? And in scientific reasoning, it's going to give you a rundown of deduction and induction. It's going to define deduction as either in an intro, it's going to say something like deductive reasoning is reasoning where all we're doing is exchanging terms, or where the premises guarantee the truth of the conclusion due to form and not content, or something like that, right? And then more kind of complex textbooks, you're going to see something like some kind of maybe set theory definition, or
I have nothing wrong with that definition. I just get the sense we interpret it very differently. That definition is fine.
But so this idea that a conclusion is guaranteed by the premises, so that's because deduction is non-ampliative, right? So it doesn't add if I say
Yes.
P and Q, right, and then I say therefore P.
I thought
don't have anything
I
else.
thought the first thing you said was more interesting, though, the exchange of terms. I agree with everything you're going here. I agree with everything you're saying here, man, about how it's non-ambulative. I'm just what you said about the exchange of terms being deductive. I'd like
Yeah,
to
but
focus
that's
there.
why it's non-ampliative, right? Because you don't add
That's
any
right.
terms.
That's
All you
right.
can do is subtract or exchange, right?
That's
You
right.
can never add. And so whenever you
Perfect.
want to talk about anything that's, so if you want to talk about future events, any future event has to be spoken about inductively, right? If it's reasonable, it has to be inductively reasoned to. It can't be deductive. Because you
Future event not in terms of your own system of reasoning. You could predict your own system of reasoning future. I know, and like I could say, I can leave a little disclaimer that things could change, my mind could change, but I know that as long as I stick to the foundation of deductive reasoning, my method will not change for the rest of my life.
Okay, but that's an inductive inference.
It's inductive to your observation or my observation of my future self, but it's deductive in it's like it's deductive in its method. It's deductive. What am I trying to say here? It's deductive. I don't know what like the system itself is deductive.
So the reason why it's inductive is it's because it's conditional, right? It's conditional on this. Okay, if you've implied this deductive method forever, or if you're of this frame that, hey, for this entire period I've held this deductive method and I'm going to hold this mindset for the rest of my life, then
This is so good. This is such a good conversation. Keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. If you're like, you're because you've implied this deductive method, or previous Fs have been Gs, future Fs are Gs. Remember, future is not contained in our premise, right? You've not experienced the future yet, so your mind could change. You could find that the definitions you're using actually don't sync up with what you mean, something like that, right? You could find a bunch of different things that destroy that conditional. And so it's not guaranteed by the premises. It's only on the conditional that the premises.
Perfect. We are almost making the exact same point there. It's just such a nuance, Mitch. The conditional nature is the thing that is not going to change in the system of reasoning. That is the very deductive method that I'm espousing. This conditional nature of thinking is the very deductive method that will not change. It's conditional.
Oh yeah, well, yeah,
The
for sure. I
exchange,
mean,
the change or exchange of terms is the very condition. That's the very thing that is conditional. This
yeah,
exchange. Yes.
yeah. So
Yes.
conditionals, yeah. So a conditional, whether it's biconditional or whether it's just implication, P then Q. From that, you get two valid inference rules. You get the positive, which is P therefore Q, and you get the contrapositive, not Q therefore not P, right? And that's modus ponens, modus tollens. So you get out of that these two deductive inference rules. But what you plug into P and Q is always going to be inductive. Is I guess my point.
Yeah,
So even
the
though it's
only
deductive
issue
overall,
the only issue that I had with all that was that I didn't hear the conditional at the start. Like obviously it's implied, but modus ponens is if P then Q, and that structure is so crucial when we're talking about validity, right? If that conditional is not implied, if the word if is not there,
hmm
truly it's invalid.
yeah. So P then Q is like if P then Q in natural language.
And so I'm quite literally making the claim that our psychology suffers from that invalidity. If we continuously apply our reasoning unconditionally, we will suffer psychologically, and that pattern seems to be educated almost into us through this neurotic attempts at inductive reasoning, without the relief of deductive reasoning, which is the exact opposite, which is the very thing you need for emotional stability. Picture a chart just going up to the right all the time. You need the stability. What's the equilibrium? It's the opposite of induction, which is deduction. Both have their tentative nature, but the nuances in that nature have not been popularized. And so realizing that induction's tentative gets us nowhere in an academic sense. And to really digest the tentative nature of deduction employs this psychological humility that I think is healing. I hope everyone hears me on this. Apparently I'm very passionate about it.
Yeah, it's still very
We
difficult.
don't. The thing is, it's like I would agree with Mitch along these lines when we're dealing with the premises, right? Like the soundness of them is somewhat subject to induction, right? And this is where I think we still face problems with deductive arguments that and so for me, like when we're dealing with this, all of the uncertainty within my worldview doesn't make me depressed. And so, I think maybe some people might become depressed by some kind of, I have no idea what would drive or trigger someone to experience depression. But the uncertainty in the world around me, whether things are random or not, these things are actually an area by which help me to I guess like before when I was in a religious doctrine, certainty was provided through like some of the God claims that were presented to me, right? There was a foundation to my worldview. But for me, what I find exciting is the uncertainty within the universe, right? And that's what drives me in my job, that inquiry to try and understand the world around us. But my depression is something completely different to what I hold as a foundational worldview, right?
That is very, well, to be honest, that is very, very perplexing. That is very, like, astounding to me.
I agree with Robbie's completely. I guess this is maybe where the miscommunication is coming from as well.
No, I agree. I don't disagree with anything. I don't think so far. At this point, we seem to be at a consensus. I find that astounding. I find that the dissonance between our worldview, like there, well, here's this faith component. Because I'm obviously not claiming to have a perfect, realization of this or articulation of this, but my faith tends to believe that I think there might be a worldview that does basically insulate you from at least the majority of mental health issues. Is that far-fetched?
Sorry, can you just repeat that last line? I was reading the comments here. I'm really sorry. I didn't
No,
hear
don't
that
be
part.
sorry. Don't be sorry. Don't be sorry. Mitch says, I just want to clear modus ponens isn't if P then Q. There's no conditional applied. Mitch?
No, so the point there is that if P then Q is a conditional statement, modus ponens is the inference rule you use to, if you affirm the antecedent, then you can
There you go.
conclude the consequent. So
Yeah. Even though the if isn't in front of P and Q, it's implied, right? That conditional aspect of the antecedent's implied.
yeah, exactly. The inference. So then the opposite inference rule, right, is not Q, therefore not P.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is why falsification. This is why falsification's, in my opinion, stronger, right, than a positive claim. Like the modus tollens gets us to you can prove a contradiction. You can prove things as not true. You know, you can definitely get to that point.
Sort of. So this is Popper's claim, but Popper's claim faces some. This like Popper is really my number one enemy. Like I don't believe I'm a skeptic, so I think Popper. I think deduction, falsification. You never really falsify anything. Because what you can do is you can always supplement an auxiliary hypothesis. So something
Why
that.
do you think I'm focusing on the conditional, Mitch? You know? Why do you think I'm focusing on the conditional?
Because modus tollens is conditional, right? Modus tollens is
no, because you're trying to show, right? You're trying to show that deduction embraces the conditional. This is what's so hard to wrap your head around. It takes years to think about it. Like you cannot. Why can we affirm things through deduction? Because it's embracing the conditional. It's the only one that actually puts forward the conditional as a biases. The conditional is included as part of the terms in a deduction. It's not an inference rule that so induction is one step further where we embrace the inference, but deduction doesn't even embrace the inference rule. Right?
So deduction does. So inference rules are the result of deduction, right? An inference rule is something that's going to preserve equality between sets or between any logical item. So the fact that contrapositive, for example, is a rule that you flip the symbols of a conditional, and then you flip the antecedent with the consequent. So if you hear like if I study hard, I will pass. I did not pass, therefore I did not study hard, right? That's modus tollens. So that inference rule is because it's completely logically equivalent to say that if P then Q, P therefore Q. It's logically equivalent to say P then Q, not Q, therefore P, therefore not P. So this is why one man's modus ponens is another man's modus tollens, because
yes, but but they're not quite, because what I'm trying to say here is in what
they are, yeah. So if you draw a truth table, they have the exact same truth tables, right? If you were to compare truth tables, they have the exact same truth values in all possible worlds. So if they have all the same truth values in all possible worlds, that's just what it means to be logically equivalent.
Yes,
that's different to being equal as well. Just to clarify that.
That's a good differentiation. I just see that one is incorporate. Okay, the truth tables would be the same. One, however, it's just a different interpretation of the truth symbols, right? If you're using modus tollens, we're incorporating the conditional into the truth table. If we're just using modus ponens, then what's happening is the conditional is somehow assumed, right? We're not incorporating it into the table, it's just assumed. And so that's so nuanced. I don't even know how to talk about it, but it's actually very, very important, right? Because one, the truth table of the modus tollens is actually confirming within a unit, within an assumption that we've already bound within a limit. And whereas modus ponens isn't. Modus ponens has unlimited bounds due to this conditional nature of the syntax itself, right? We can literally re-plug in any variable we want into the syntax, including the conditionals themselves, including the inference rules.
Sorry, say that again.
Okay. The truth tables are the same, whether we use modus ponens or modus tollens, right? And I could be wrong here. I could be totally just off my rocker here. The truth tables are the same, but as far as I see it, the interpretation of those truth tables are different. One is bound by limits and one isn't. Modus tollens is bound, right? Because we're incorporating the conditional nature of the premises into the truth table, if that makes any sense. I don't know if that makes sense at all.
Like,
Don't know. You go ahead,
depending
Mitch.
on depending on, because some go left to right, some go right to left, but it's basically TFTT is going to be the truth table for both modus ponens,
Yes.
modus ponens and modus tollens. It's like 1011, right? True, false, true, true. It's going to be true in the case that the antecedent is attained. It's going to be false in the case where the antecedent is attained, but the consequent is not. It's going to be vacuously true in any case where the antecedent isn't attained. So that's why we can make those arguments, is because this is the truth table for implication. It's only one truth table. It's just the truth table for implication. And then the argument, modus tollens or modus ponens, relies on whether we deny the consequent or whether we affirm the antecedent. And so, yeah, there is a big difference between denying. They're different possible worlds, right? If I deny the antecedent, that's a different possible world for where I confirm the consequent. Because if I studied hard, then I passed, and if I didn't pass, then I didn't study hard. So they're different worlds for sure. But it's
You're
the same.
articulating this way better than I did.
Okay, right. Yeah, so it's a different conclusion, but same. It's logically equivalent, same inference.
Okay, well, oh man.
Do you understand what Mitch is saying when he's
I
talking
do.
about logically
I do.
equivalent?
I
Right.
do. Yeah. So maybe I don't actually. Maybe I don't actually know logical equivalence. Because P then Q is not the same as if P then Q. We would agree on that.
No.
So
P then Q
yeah,
is
you go
shorthand.
ahead, man.
Yeah, P then Q is shorthand for if P then Q. So if P then Q is like a natural language way of saying P implies Q.
Okay. So so then we just found the whole tension there. So the reason it's okay. So I understand why they are the same. Now it's on you to understand why they aren't. Why is the conditional so important to our mental health? Why is the conditional not something that empirically or inductively is not necessary? But why is that conditional so necessary for deductive reasoning and what I'm saying is our mental health?
So one thing I'd say, and I haven't been deeply in this, but in terms of like logical equivalence, I think there's this concept of like, let's say, difference without a distinction. Like, you're claiming that there's some difference between two things.
Massive difference,
Right.
between
You're
those two,
claiming that,
especially when it comes to syntax, right?
so you're claiming that,
Deductively.
wait. So you're claiming that there's a difference between two things when, if the evaluation of those two things is based on logical conclusions and they're logically equivalent, then de facto there is no difference.
Right.
Unless you introduce some other domain where you can describe the differences between the two things. If all you're going on is logical conclusions as the way that you establish differences,
Right.
then there is no difference. They are identical.
Exactly. I agree with all that. The problem is they're not identical when we look at the syntax. They are
Yeah.
identical when we look at the truth tables. Syntax, not so.
But this is why Mitch is saying logically equivalent, right? It's not the same as them being equal.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, because they're literally different conclusions, right? If like I said, if I study hard, then I pass, is a completely different world to where I didn't pass, therefore I didn't study hard. I guess so. The difference in methodological use, right, would be that if I'm trying to use modus ponens in science, what I'm doing is I'm trying to confirm things. And this is probably not the way to go about it, right? Whereas if I'm trying to use modus ponens, then I'm trying to falsify things, right? Because the thing is with modus ponens is that you've got these two, like I gave the TFTT, right? So there's a possible world in which, okay, P, therefore Q, fine. But there's also this possible world where not P and still Q. And so what can happen is if I fail to confirm something, it could be just because I got the wrong P, because any P can confirm a Q, because Q can exist without P. It's just that whenever you have P, you have Q. So confirmation is impossible, right? We couldn't confirm. Falsification though is still impossible, because even though it seems
it's possible within limits. It's impossible if you don't limit the terms. It's impossible. But as long as you limit the terms, it's totally possible. Within a framework, it is completely possible.
Within a framework, right? So if I say something like F equals ma everywhere I look, and then I look at some kind of astronomical scale where it doesn't apply or something, then this would be a reason for me to reject the idea that F equals ma applies everywhere, right?
So literally, man, you're making my argument for me, and I appreciate you guys struggling through this with me. Literally, bro, this is what I'm actually trying to get at, right?
Yeah. I'm there with you. It's just the thing is, so you could say something like, in fact, let's move to Newtonian gravitation, right? Newtonian dynamics. So it's not the case that we have actually falsified Newtonian dynamics by seeing, by observing, let's see, the different speeds at which the inner and outer regions of galaxies spin, right? Because there's this idea that you could have a modified Newtonian dynamics that could come along, and you have these auxiliary hypotheses that you just stuff in to account for the difference. So wherever we can falsify something, we can also rescue something with an auxiliary hypothesis. For example, the precession of Mercury, right? We couldn't get that for a while, and so what was posited was an extra planet. This extra planet served as this auxiliary hypothesis where the pre-existing theory was rescued by this idea that we just simply didn't have all the data. And so this is why falsification also doesn't work, is because you can always insert an auxiliary hypothesis to rescue the data.
That is falsification working.
Well, I mean, so it's working in a way that's inductive, which is that you can build a case.
I disagree because you are presuming the good faith of the scientist, Mitch. That's the problem here.
I don't understand. Can you explain to me what you mean by that?
If they're purely inductive, they won't be willing to incorporate an auxiliary hypothesis.
But that's what it would be. It would be if you auxiliary, if you give, so it's ampliative, right? Because you're adding an auxiliary hypothesis. So
Yes.
it's inductive.
It's deductive to the limit you're to the fact that you're incorporating it into your previous hypothesis. If the hypothesis was not deductive, it wouldn't have a term that you could change or limit, or a chance for. No deduction has the chance for an auxiliary hypothesis.
No, what did you say? Sorry.
You can't add an auxiliary hypothesis to a deduction. I don't know. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I mean, you could have like a deduction that includes, a category of hypotheses, and you could just say something like, one of these must be true.
Right. And then it would be inductive on which one is true. Right. So it would be a deductive model. You could say, and this is how it is phrased. It's general law.
Wait.
Oh, sorry.
If you had the deductive model that gave you several options, then that now your model's set, and you could no longer inductively add another auxiliary hypothesis. But that's not an example of an auxiliary hypothesis. An auxiliary hypothesis would mean that you have a deductive argument, and somehow later, after you've gone and observed between the options you had, you say, oh, I don't want A, B, C, or D, we're going to add in F. And that would not be deductive.
It's still deductive. It just means that your premises have been altered.
So
look, if I'm gonna write this in the comments, right? So that deductively just means all auxiliary hypotheses. So if I do that, if I have main hypotheses, if I have general law implies hypothetical observation plus auxiliary hypotheses, not observation, therefore then I have to, that whole line of auxiliary hypotheses, general laws, and hypothetical observation, all of that line is in question, including the set of all auxiliary hypotheses. That may have not made sense. So basically,
it did make sense.
Right.
It did make sense. I fully grasp what you said.
Right. So we have to deny that entire set, right? We have to deny that entire set. And
again, it's so interesting how we're both using this term, because the good faith, the amount of good faith you have in this discussion, I don't think you fully grasp how much it is implied in your reasoning. You wish you could articulate this and it's coming out through the syntax, but you're not seeing it. It's so odd to me, as my own, I guess, I'm now having a bit of an ego thing, but I
could be missing something, but do you think it would be easy to articulate what I'm missing?
Well, the good faith component, how that's part of the method, I guess, and how it's a formalized part. It's a formalized part of the scientific method to have this good faith ability to deduce things, and you're so natural at it, but you're unwilling to call it deduction. When you're saying that you could incorporate all these terms into a line under the hypothesis, including auxiliary hypothesis, that's so deductive. You've deduced the possibilities down to every possibility, so much so.
Oh yeah, so I would describe that like Darth did. I would describe the inclusion of all auxiliary hypotheses deductive, right? But the issue is that we could never fulfill that. We could never actually perform a modus tollens, right? Because we've got an infinite amount of auxiliary hypotheses. So if it's like the conjunction of not my observation, right, and not auxiliary hypotheses, and not main hypotheses, if all of that is required to be debunked, right, all of that is required to be negated, or to be affirmed by not Q, right? So all of these things are supposed to be falsified by me not observing an actual observation, but it doesn't. You could say, okay, right, what's the explanation for why I didn't observe what I should have observed? Well, either the initial prediction was wrong in conjunction with the hypothesis. So either the observation was faulty because of the machines I used, or the hypothesis is faulty. But then we introduce this thing as we introduce this infinite set of auxiliary hypotheses, which is also that things don't have particular exceptions, right? Where we can write something into the law, like modified Newtonian dynamics, that slightly changes things, or we can account for things by positing an extra planet, right? Things like this simply are an infinite set, right? And so now I've got to deny this infinite set plus the conjunction of the original hypothesis with the lack of observation to get a modus tollens. So all of that, my faith, if I'm to have any faith at all, I have to have inductive reasoning. I have to assume the principle of uniformity, and I have to say something like, because auxiliary hypotheses, blah 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 blah, x a to z, are less parsimonious, and more parsimonious things tend to be blah 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 in the past. Then I can come to a conclusion in the future about whether it's reliable, right? To use this method. Otherwise, if I'm doing it deductively, I've got this infinite burden, this infinite hill to climb that I just cannot do. I cannot debunk every auxiliary hypothesis deductively.
No, you're so interesting. It's so interesting. Because so much. I agree with literally 99% of everything you're saying. I'm just hearing deduction. The majority. It's like watching a pro baseball player pitch, and then you from the side get a whole different angle of their technique, and then you go up and you say, "Did you know every time you pitch you do this?" And they're like, "No, I don't." Right? Like in my head, and
what am I denying? That I'm using some kind of method.
Yeah, that your base method is deduction, not induction. Your tendency to be like, deduction gets us nowhere. We can't falsify, and to lean into the inductive method is a bit of a facade. I believe your true methodology is a deductive one. I think it gets you further, especially in like this word method. You seem to deductively be reasoning with me. You're not standing your ground on your own terms. You're so flexible in good faith. This term of good faith that you went to, you described it perfectly. You described where your faith is at using set theory and the universal principle. You described it. You just said it was inductive, not deductive, which I found interesting. But other than that, I agree with everything you said.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, I mean,
like the faith component seems deductive, and that seems to be your base method. It doesn't seem to be based. Otherwise, I think you'd go a little crazy, and I think people do.
Maybe.
Like I think you have a good faith about you, and you like give the benefit of the doubt, and you allow your bias to lean towards like the good and the true and the beautiful. Even though you're skeptical, you apply your skepticism like towards that end. Your skepticism isn't aimless, right?
That's right. I have an axiology, and you could argue that on some kind of axiological basis that there is whatever I'm doing, whatever method, plus a normative, some kind of normativity towards it, right? So the fact that I'm skeptical, the fact that I'm implying, there's something to doubt and maybe a direction to go in, maybe implies some kind of categorical. See, I'm when it comes to axiology, I'm on the fence. I'm not quite an anti-realist, so you might get me there, right? If we're talking about axiology and whether I use certain virtues, then fine, I get what you mean. But that would
Mitch,
be like
you're not an anti-realist?
I'm not quite an anti-realist now.
What would that make you? Like, what are you?
So
you're a realist. What type of realist?
explaining. So I'm not a realist. I would much rather reject any like current notion of realism, like non-naturalism or naturalism.
So I'm really confused. Naturalism doesn't really fall into realism.
I mean, you could argue that, but if you were to just look at any typical flowchart of meta-ethical positions, you would see that naturalism or natural realism just falls under that branch. You could describe it differently, and I'm amenable to it.
Naturalism is actually anti-realism.
That's
Mitch,
fine.
Mitch,
I'm amenable
Mitch has
to
like a really nuanced position on this, bro. You should actually take a sec. If he articulates his full position on it, if he's kind enough to do that, his position, Jesus, is like actually really well thought out. Really
Okay.
well thought out.
Yeah, I'm
on the
just
whole, yeah.
slightly confused on the naturalism being realism. Naturalism is actually anti-realism because it doesn't affirm Platonism.
Okay, so you may be
Jesus,
you're referring
yeah,
to
just
metaphysical naturalism, maybe.
yeah, you're not up to the same level of the conversation yet, so maybe just
Yeah, that
maybe
doesn't
ask
really
a question or
that doesn't
something.
tell me anything, Darth
Maybe
Nerder. Sorry.
maybe ask a question or something.
Well, I think what's been is
No,
maybe like
I know. I'm sorry, Darth Nerder.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. I know what naturalism is, and it's not. It doesn't deal. It's not realism. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. You mean metaphysical naturalism, right? Which you
Yeah,
might say-
metaphysically. Yeah, what are you talking about?
meta-ethical naturalism.
Okay, so you're talking about meta-ethics?
Yeah.
So how can you describe the difference between that and regular naturalism?
Yeah. So if you ask the question, you know, if I make the proposition or sentence, X is good, and then you ask me what I mean by that, what I can mean by that is X is good, which is true or false, or I can mean yay X, which can't be true or false, right? If we go down the path that what I'm really saying is X is good, right? Subject, copula, predicate. Then I am making a proposition, and so it has a true or false value. If it can have a true or false value, but always fails to attain to be true, then it's an error theory, which is anti-realism on the cognitivist side. If it is true, but only in virtue of some indexical reference, so the person saying it, so like I believe X is bad, is only true if I do in fact believe X is bad. This is subjectivism, and that's another stance on anti-realism on the cognitivist side. But then if I believe that the truth of X is good relies on some natural feature, some synthetic feature of the world that can be discovered scientifically, like suffering or something like that, then empirically, I would say it's real, right? It's real, and it would be natural realism because it relies on something natural. However, if I said that good is actually some kind of universal, and it's instantiated but not in fact captured synthetically because it doesn't have a causal relationship, it's an abstractor, it has some kind of Platonic existence, then I'm a moral realist, but I'm a non-naturalist. So realism can have a naturalist component or a non-naturalist component, depending on whether you're pertaining to particulars or universals.
Okay. That makes sense. All right. Thanks for that.
Like I said earlier, I record all these and put them on my YouTube. I won't include the mischievous bits we had earlier, but Mitch, the way you articulated that and everything, man, I appreciate this conversation so much, and I hope you don't mind. Same with you, Robbie and Darth, that I upload this to my YouTube as, again, just another conversation. I'll cut out any of the mischievous stuff, I promise. But like, I'd love to be able to re-listen to this, and redigest everything you've said multiple times, because you've laid it out so well, all of you. You've laid out all your positions so well, and I really do value it a whole lot. So again, thank you, and I hope I have your consent to do that.
Yeah, dude, that's no worries with me. Only the sub and dom pads.
Imagine if I just upload that. I'm just gonna upload snippets of that. Just cut it and no,
exactly.
man, no.
Exactly.
So,
To be
Mitch, it's purely dealing with morals.
Right. Purely dealing with morals. So
Okay.
it doesn't infer like nominalism where I have to, deny universals, and then, yeah, you could say something like it's maybe subjective. I think there are like there'll be Augustinian there'll be some views against that and some views for that. So like if
Is
you're
that like fictionalism or nihilism?
So nominalism is like two claims basically. It's either the claim that universals don't exist, or it's the claim that abstracta as a whole don't exist.
Okay, so you're a nominalist?
I'm not a nominalist, no.
Okay.
I'm a pluralist, so I'm a pluralist skeptic. So in a Pyrrhonian sense, or there's a position called indirect skepticism, which is given by kind of an anonymous philosopher who works in politics. So they don't really give their they remain anonymous, but indirect skepticism is kind of like Pyrrhonianism, where you don't say like propositions are false, but the way you argue as an indirect skeptic is you take whatever proposition is given, whatever conclusion, you take that as an indirect proof, as premise one, and then you somehow derive a conclusion, a contradiction from it. And so you see all positions lead to contradictions.
So you're,
therefore, I suspend judgment.
so you're an indirect skeptic, right? Not a moral skeptic.
Yeah, I'm not a moral skeptic. I'm a moral pluralist. So I think some notions of morality are going to be objective. Some are going to be subjective.
And in your worldview, how do you ground like concepts in abstracta?
I don't have a grounding for them, but I feel that they either exist independently of particulars, in which case then they exist somehow non-temporally, non-causally, non-spatially. And that's fine. I don't want to assume that's not the case, but I'm not privy to that. I don't. That view seems inflated to me. Or I could ground it in the mind of God, but this seems to me like a mistake.
So would that make you agnostic?
Yeah, agnostic.
Okay, for sure. Okay, that's very cool. So you believe there's possibly a God, and there's possibly these abstract objects that God may be created, and they are atemporal and non-physical.
Yeah, exactly. So long as God is never in these situations, because I'm willing to take any definition of God. The only definitions I won't take are ontological ones that assume necessity. So if we say like God is the greatest possible being and the greatest possible being is necessary, and when I say God is possible, then God is therefore necessarily possible, I'm not going to assent to that proposition. But if God is just like, an eternal creator being, then yeah, I can say that's possible for sure.
Okay, so for some reason you don't think that God would be necessary.
Just on my worldview, in saying that God is possible and only possible, then I'm kind of, I'm going to be either agnostic to the necessity or skeptical to it.
Okay, I see. Very cool. All right.
But yeah, thanks for listening to that. I know it's not, when it gets this technical, it's really difficult for me to communicate. So,
That's awesome.
You can, thank you for listening.
Yeah, no Logic is recording, so.
Dude, it's so awesome. It's so awesome, especially to be able to go back and listen to all this. Like, it's modern media, right? Like, we don't only express ourselves in our writing and everything. I think this content, it's productive. It's good to be able to even just listen back to yourself and hear how well you articulated yourself. Like, yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, very cool. Mitch, you seem to be somebody who's very calm to speak to, very like Logic was saying, well articulated.
Yeah, you too, and yeah, thanks for mentioning.
Yeah, we very I appreciate it because I come across a lot of people who tend to be very like angry.
Oh, you're muted, Jesus.
I don't know if he recognizes.
Oh, sorry, I got a call there. I was saying, yeah, I come across people who are like angry and they are very emotional, and sometimes maybe they don't know how to explain themselves.
Right, and yeah, TikTok's difficult to navigate because we can't see each other. You know, a lot of human contact is mediated by body language and building rapport. And every time we enter a new conversation with a new person, I know we've kind of spoke before, but not that much. And so when you don't know somebody, we can sometimes mount a defensive response. And
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, it's been great talking to all of you, and yeah, I'm glad you've let me kind of monologue for ages. I'm gonna probably get back and do some gaming with my fiance. So it's been it's been good to talk.
Yeah, will you enjoy your day?
Later, G.
Everyone.
See you around, Mitch. Thank you so much for coming on, bro.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you.
I'm gonna go find somebody to debate with, okay?
Okay, Jesus, good to see you, man. You're welcome anytime. Thanks for coming up.
Yeah.
Bye, Jesus.
Yep, good to see you.
Bye,
Bless you
Jesus.
guys. Take care.
Like, imagine if that was just Jesus dropping in quick.
Hey guys, I wanted to get your thoughts on this.
Just didn't even really say much. Just alright, bye guys. That'd be crazy. We didn't even get to the money shit, Darth. It's been like 7 hours now.
Hanging out, working at the same time, doing my thing.
Should we go look for some drama?
Sorry, good. One thing I forgot I meant to mention to you, Logic, is one of the project I'm actively working on right now is an automated trading system.
No way, man. I would love to get involved. I would love to help you with that. Wow. So what do you mean? What do you mean? Like you're gonna try to sell it as a product? I've been working on
this for years, on and off.
No way.
I put a chunk of time into it a few years ago, but then got distracted by actually working for other companies. But now that I'm back in entrepreneur mode, it's one of my priorities to try to get it to the next level. If I can ever get it where I'm confident enough in it that I'm willing to apply actual money to it and it works, then theoretically that's like a golden goose type thing, right?
So are you what? But you want to use? Okay, so that is always the funny tension, isn't it? It's like, do you want to use it for your own money or do you want to sell it as a product or both?
My own. If it works, there's no reason to let anybody else use it.
Right. Interesting. Okay, so this is why everyone's skeptical of anyone who teaches trading, right? Because everyone's
100%.
if you're good at trading, why the hell are you here charging me $100?
Most likely you're teaching it so that people follow whatever you say, so that you have some extra predictability in your own investments.
Not only that, you make money off of selling the program. You don't need to invest. You're literally selling the program. Yeah, that's the whole thing. That's the whole shtick.
That's why that whole thing of what we started out with in terms of the technical analysis, that's what I feel like. That's almost like someone teaching a spiritual woo and making money off of it. You know,
you're nailing it right on the head, bro. Why? You look at combine everything. Look at what I'm doing. I'm talking about deduction. I'm talking about how it applies to emotions. and how that all relates to the math of what you're trying to do algorithmically in trading, right? The
Yo,
methods that
dudes.
just go ahead, Robbie.
I'm going to pop down, guys. I'm going to go see if Tiny's up, and then it's nice to have been up here, man. And
Yeah.
feel free to use the footage.
I'll probably
Okay,
pop
Robbie.
over there too, Logic. Let's reconvene.
Okay, sure. We can talk another time, guys. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for
And think
humoring me.
about the
I love
whole
y'all.
like do some research on that, on like the ability for people to put money into, let's say, the down payment or something.
Oh wait, what do you mean?
On like if you wanted to buy a house or something.
Do research on that?
Yeah, because like this thing's like they may not allow it.
Oh, because you were interested in it. I see. We were talking about you being interested in that. Yeah. Okay. I will. I will go. I will look into that. G. I
Yeah,
will for sure.
that's a to do.
Yeah, like out of country or like like I mean it could be kind of under the table, I suppose. I don't know.
Well, it's tricky, right? That's what I mean. You
Yeah.
got to look into it. There might be
Yeah.
no way to do it.
Yeah. Just really quickly, do you know TradingView?
Which one is that?
TradingView is like
It sounds
really
sounds familiar. Yeah.
You can back test any algorithmatized trading
Yeah.
strategy
So I
you
wrote
want.
my own back testing infrastructure because I'm actually dealing with like I'm doing like day trading type stuff. So I need all of the data, not just like dailies. Most of those things are like daily.
Oh no, these charts are any time frame you want. Any time frame you want. But the main thing is the coding language that is PineScript, and like through that and through its backtesting, this is like literally this
And
is
do they have like enterprise guarantees about not disclosing or using your code?
yeah, you can privatize it. To be honest, you can privatize it. Yeah, I think you have to pay,
whatever that
pay to
means,
do that.
right? I mean, like, what's the guarantees? You know?
No, that's a good point. That's a good point. But for the most part, I think this is the industry norm. Like
What's
pretty
the
much
name of it
every
again? I mean, I've probably seen it. Which one is it?
TradingView.
Yeah, it
Like
sounds
if
really
you go
feasible.
if you go to any exchange, most
Actually,
of
I
them are
just started typing in tradingview.com and it filled in my browser.
yeah. So if you go to any exchange, they'll use TradingView. Most exchanges, that when you look at the charts, the chart that they're importing is a TradingView chart. They're using this because on TradingView you can look up anything, any commodity, any fiat currency, crypto, anything. But the charting, the ability to chart is really endless. This allows you to do the most. It's the biggest charting
Well, honestly,
script.
I don't care about charting.
Well, I mean, when you don't have a physical chart, you're using the code. It's the same thing. Same thing. You don't have to have a physical chart. I just mean algorithmatizing trading. TradingView is the norm, I think, the industry standard.
I'll take a look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. Good luck with that search, bro, and I will get back to you on the house thing. I hope you have a wonderful day, Darth.
You too. Talk to you later, man.
Peace, Darth. All right, with that, guys, I'm sorry to those of you that were in the queue. I was kind of letting the panel die off gently and organically there. I need to go now, but I appreciate everyone who stopped in to listen and anyone who came up on the panel. You guys are all G's, and I will be uploading this minus the 18 plus content to YouTube. So if you want to check out any of my past podcasts, you can go to the link in my bio onto my YouTube. Most people aren't interested in the 7-hour discussion, so I don't get many views, but if you were interested in these discussions, the same regulars that were on the panel today show up in those previous episodes as well as many others. So I'll leave you and love you with that. Peace and love.